I would say two.
All right, we're live. It is 8:10 a.m. on the 26th of January. At this point in time, I'll call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order.
And I'd like to call the Hamilton Finance and Advisory Committee to order at 8:10 on January 26th. And good morning, Marcy.
Morning, Marcy.
All right, so before us today, we have really one thing on the agenda that includes many, many things, and that is our budget review. And we have our new town manager before us to give us some information. Joe.
Good morning, thank you. First, I want to thank everybody that participated in the budget process. Obviously, Marissa was instrumental, but the department heads and the Finance Commission all met starting back in December. Your boards met jointly to give our offices some guidance on how to proceed. And so what you have before you is a 2020 budget proposal. We have a little bit of a PowerPoint, which I can't display because my new laptop is too new to talk to that screen there. So we have I have printed it out for you, and we'll make it available on the town website for everybody. The first page of the review here just goes through some of the basics that we went through at the Board of Selectmen's meeting the other night. The FY20 budget proposal in total is a $33 million budget for spending for town and schools. It's a total increase in spending of $2,336,603 over the FY19 budget. The school increase in that share is $782,000, and the total town increase is $1.5 million. But it's important to note that about $900,000 of that is actually transferred from free cash to the newly established stabilization funds. So the total town increase without the appropriation of stabilization funds is $661,797. We also have a fiscal 2020 water enterprise budget in your budget book, which does not impact the tax rate, but equals $1.887 million and an increase of $67,000 over last year. The town budget increases include a contingency fund for negotiations with 3 collective bargaining units, the addition of assistant DPW director position, the addition of a shared regional human resources director, excuse me, I'm a little tongue-tied, it's early, with a corresponding revenue from IMAs. The plan for this is that we put the entire cost of a human resource director into our budget, and the goal would be to sign IMAs with with 2 other communities who we are currently talking to who are very interested. And we sign the IMAs, they'll reimburse us for 2/3 of the expense. So we'll have we show revenue on the revenue side coming in on those. If something happens and the IMAs do not get activated, we will not use the entire amount of money that we're seeking. We will just use about 1/3 of it to contract with services. I've got quotes from a couple of different human resource development organizations, municipal government consultants that could do the service. It would not be as good. We wouldn't get as much service, but for about the same $35,000, I can handle a contract for a year until we can work on the IMAs again. So human resources function is something we really need. We also need an assistant DPW director. Tim is here to talk about that and many other things that you'll probably have questions about. Other increases in this budget include rising costs for trash and recycling, rising costs for group health and life insurance, the rising costs of our employee retirement plan, and debt spending related to the capital improvement plan. Your next page, you'll have a little bit of a budget breakdown. These slides were all prepared by Marissa. She's much better at this stuff than I am. You have your expenditures and revenues for the FY20 budget, and it shows the % change over the FY19 budget. So again, our expenditures and our revenues both net a 7.6% increase. And then for those who love to look at pie charts, we have 2 really nice ones. The town budget breakdown shows that we spend nearly 60% of our budget on education. That's including debt service on the school side. We also spend another 15.3% on unclassified expenses, things that we have no control over, and therefore it's difficult to quantify. In total, our government spending, let me see, percentage breakdown, our our general government spending is just about 26% of the budget. So, on the next page, it shows you revenues and available funds. This is the one that's going to affect most people. You'll see that 87.4% of our revenues come from property taxes, and another 3.2% come from motor vehicle excise tax. So, by and large, our budget comes from our local residents. So we take a very great deal of care in trying to make sure we minimize the impact to them. Unfortunately, there are a lot of expenses that we have that we just don't have any control over. In the FY20 capital budget, which is also in your books, we have a recommended capital budget of $5 million, and that shows you there. I'm going to have Marissa come up and talk a little bit about how we're funding some of this, because it's not all coming right out of the tax rate. But several of these items are, are programmed into the capital improvement plan, and several others are forecasts for things that we need to get done, like Chabaco Woods Road. Those would be initially bonding, and we'd be paying the debt service on those this year, not the entire bill. So let me have Marissa talk a little bit about that real quick, just give you a little bit of emphasis on it.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It might actually be easier if you refer to the green book that you have. There's a capital budget tab, and in there it actually shows you all the projects for each department. So the PowerPoint slide only has the department itself, but it does not show you what the projects are. So in the green book, you'll have what the projects are, what the estimated amount is, and what we're recommending the funding source to be. So the first one is actually general government for the voting machines. It's $21,300, and we're recommending that that would be either a budgetary, so tax rate, or a free cash. Then you have a pickup truck over at the fire department, and also at the police, an SUV. Same thing, we're recommending that that would be funded through the budget. Going on to the DPW, there's a couple of projects there. There's a dump truck and road and sidewalks repair program, which we've been doing this every year. And again, we're recommending that that would be either free cash or budgetary. And then you have $100,000 that we're planning to use Chapter 90 funds for the roads and sidewalks program as well.
What is Chapter 90 again?
Chapter 90 is a state program. It's
Okay.
like a state grant program. Then you have Chabaco Road paving, estimated at about $1 million, and we're recommending that would be bonded. Going on to facilities, you have the town hall renovation for the design phase, about $700,000, and once again, we're recommending that would be bonded. And parks and recreation, the concession bathroom and storage building at Patton Park, about $50,000. Recommending to use free cash or budgetary. And then the water. For water, we have 3 projects. Every year we actually have meter replacement program of about $15,000, so we're just recommending that that would be retained earnings or user charges. And then the 2 major projects are the Chabaco Road water main and the water treatment plant, and both of them are about $1.5 million each. And again, we're recommending that would be bonded as well. So this budget right now includes an estimated debt service payment and interest payment. Oops, sorry, there goes your name. Or not. So we have an estimate there for those projects that we're recommending to be bonded based on estimates that we got from our financial advisors. Interest rates are going up, so I want to say that it's about $50,000 for the first year just for interest, and then moving forward you would see a big jump there. I think the principal payment on these 2 projects for fiscal year 21 would be about $300,000. And similar to the other 2 projects in governmental, so the Chabaco Road and the Town Hall renovations, again, this budget does include an estimate on debt service payments for those 2 projects as well.
Could you again say the amount in future years? for debt service and bonding?
I can confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that on the two projects on the water enterprise in future years, when you start paying the principal, again, it's estimated because we don't know when we're going to actually issue, what the interest rate that we're going to get, but I think it's about $300,000 in principal.
May I ask a question
Sure.
about the Tobacco Road water main? Is that to bring water to the homes on Tobacco Road, or is that to bring the water main into Manchester so we might be able to tap into their plant?
Tim Olson?
Tim Olson, DPW Director. The intention of that is to, I guess, to tie into Manchester's plant, to work with them, to tie in as an additional source
Okay.
of using the North Coastal Basin. It is going to take a little bit of negotiations with them.
And with the state.
And with the state, there is, it's two different basins, obviously the Ipswich River as well as North Coastal. So it's something that we just want to kind of put in front of you as well, but there is work, quite a bit of work ahead of us to make that happen. But having that availability is something that we, Joe and I think it's a very important piece to evaluate and to look at and to potentially find another source. We've done some drilling. We've done some in the North Coastal. I mean, the Ipswich is a very taxed basin, so we're looking at other sources and alternatives. And I think this one is a viable source and potential good use.
No, I think it
something
makes
local,
sense.
so.
And it makes sense to do it before you pave Tobacco Road.
Well,
that's-
that's what I was just going to
that's-
say. The other aspect of
Right.
it is that we're planning to try to pave Tobacco Road this year. And it doesn't make any sense to pave the road and then come back in a couple of years and put water main. Even if we're not able to tie into the Manchester plant this year or get DEP's approval to, create two separate interlocked systems so that we can serve part of the town on the North Coastal and part of the town on the Ipswich, all that's going to take negotiation with the state. Even if we're not able to get the green light from them to do that this year, we should at least lay the water pipe so that when we get approval, because I'm an optimist and I believe we will eventually get approval, the pipe's there and we can just go.
Okay.
So, yes, it's a little bit of a big nut up front, but, these types of projects don't get cheaper as you let years go by. So if we're gonna pave the road, let's put the water main on the road and plan for the future. Whatever happens with the negotiations with Manchester and DEP, those still have to be determined, so.
So you're talking about just putting down piping.
Yeah. So we've engaged an engineer to take another look at it. It was looked at in 2012 by an engineering company, and they had an estimated cost. Given the increases in construction costs, we wanted to have it looked at anew, and the previous had really only focused on looking at paving the road. So I brought in a different engineering company that has experience with water, sewer, drainage, asked them to take a look at doing both. So they'll be getting back to us with a better construction estimate. But his first instinct when he looked at the old estimate and what our scope of work was, he thought we were pretty close. So this number is right about what we think we're gonna need.
Wasn't there also some concern, or maybe it wasn't Tobacco Road, but I thought there was some concern about where the road lies now relative to the surveyed property lines?
That's correct, and so the paving of the road our plan is that for the paving of the road to include our right-of-way, not where the road lies now. Our right-of-way goes a little bit more straight. It'll need some, it'll need a little bit of negotiation with the neighbors out there, but most of the neighbors out there that we've spoken to already know about this, and they're all right with it. They want to see the
Have
road
we
paved,
approached-
so they're willing to put up a little bit of pain
Manchester
right
at
now.
all about the water?
A very cursory remark came back to us from Manchester that they were wondering if we were interested in helping them with their water plant. And so I've been talking to the town administrator in Manchester about the human resources and about a couple of other things. Tobacco Woods Trail. I haven't really had to sit down to talk to him about the water project yet, because I actually, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver either to him or to you.
Right.
I need to know if we can move forward with the paving of Tobacco Road and get the pipe, then I can start to talk to him about what that means for us and them.
So the big question would be, what's the probability of it of this not tying into that coastal area?
I think yeah, so I can have a conversation with Greg and find out. My understanding is they currently outsource their water department, so they were looking to get out of that arrangement, or be able to have something more stable and more, you know, capable of being backed up. We have a water department, they don't, they contract it. So I think that there's a good chance of it. The fly in the ointment, so to speak, is that normally DEP doesn't like water systems to mix water from 2 different uses. So Tim's thought was that we could put a valve in between and have part of the town served by North Coastal Basin water and part of the town served by the Ipswich River water basin. I also would suggest that we could potentially give up our permitted use on the Ipswich River if we could find another source to replace it. And the fact that the permitted use is the one we're kind of having problems with as far as water quality, I'd like to give that one up anyway. I know that would be something DEP would probably be in favor of. I know IRWA would be in favor of us giving up that permitted use. So it would leave us with the registered uses that we have in the other 2 wells, and then the North Coastal as the other water source. This might take a couple of years to happen, but we want to put the cost in front of you to know whether it's worth it for us to explore.
I think the thought that my concern would be the risk of not getting, I think the idea is great.
Yep, I understand.
It's the right place to go and look for water. Sure. But if it's something that's gonna stop us, could that be a 25% or could be a 50% or 75%?
I'll put a call into the town administrator in Manchester on Monday morning. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear from me on that, since I call him about so many other things. And we'll get a gauge from him on that as well.
We've, like Joe said, we have an engineer that we're working with that will, I think we can do some preliminary calls to DEP as well, making sure that this is, if we're looking this direction, what do we have to do? What permits would we have to file? Would it be something that they would, approve? Because it is 2 different basins. I mean, one of our, everybody's talking about the Ipswich as a tax basin. Well, we're actually, if we can do this, we could maybe sell it as we're replenishing that basin in a way.
We're going to at least alleviate the stress on that basin and help you out with that.
We're bringing water back in because everything.
Great reasons, it's just that if we don't,
Yeah.
if there's a risk of it not being done, we're putting in $1 million of a pipe.
So I did mention it to Ray Maris, who's been working with the town on our issues with the permitted use anyway, and he thought it was definitely something we should continue to explore because he thought it was something that the DEP would appreciate. So we do need to have a little bit of more conversation with Manchester.
They have been I've had conversations with DEP, and their main goal for the town is to look at alternative sources, preferably outside the Ipswich River. So I think if we can look in the North Coastal and we're successful for whatever way we get the water, if it's through, Manchester's plant or another source, I think they would welcome that because that's what they've asked me to try to do. There's only so many alternatives we have here in Hamilton. So exploring those and coming back with a good plan, I think hopefully they'd be in favor of that.
Tim, do you have grants that we could tap into, or do you know of any grants for water?
So part of the reason I brought in Wood and Current to look at this is that they did a lot of work with us in Winthrop, and they're very, very good at identifying the grants that would qualify for certain types of projects. In particular on this one, I think that they also look at not just grants but other funding sources. So instead of having to go out and bond, you can sometimes, depending on what the project is, you can get what's called state revolving funds, which is a very low interest, like 1 to 2% loan that you don't have to qualify for or go out to market for. The state approves it, you put up your match, and then they give you the rest, and you pay it back over time. So the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund is the one I think that would qualify here, and Art said that he would look into that for us as he looks at the cost of the project. So would provide a little bit of a relief on the funding mechanism as well.
Assuming this all gets approved, what's the timeline for actually completing the work? Is it an FY20? Is it multiple years? Is it?
I mean, if we get the permitting, that's the trick, I guess. We're not really sure how long that process would take. I think we would, consult with Woodward and Curran and see what their thoughts are. I mean, physically, the construction wouldn't take too long once we have the money in hand and in place, and I have a contractor, engineer and contractor under a contract, but that wouldn't take long. It's just more, I think, the permitting and maybe the negotiations with Manchester and things like that might take a little bit longer than the actual construction. So.
Say it'd be at least a year.
Yeah.
Probably 2.
Yeah, because you're
Probably not this
limited.
summer, next summer
Yeah, you
to
can't
do the work.
do it in the
Yeah.
winter, so you're gonna do
Exactly.
it in the summer, and you probably won't get your permits to do anything this summer.
Probably take
So
8 to 10 months to
we're
get
at
the
least
permits.
Yeah.
talking,
Right.
21.
Yeah, exactly.
Tim, you gave a rather thorough update to the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday night for the town hall, which is also on here, and I don't know if everyone on the finance committee watched it. Could you give a real brief recap for the
Very brief.
finance committee, just on that?
Sure.
It's not known for Brevard.
Yeah, all right, this is brief. The project's going well, so. That's good. Yeah, we hired a designer. They are presently looking at, they're doing our feasibility study right now. They are looking at the structural integrity of the building as well as outside. We have a hazmat study going on, as well as we just drilled 5 soil borings out back for a proposed new septic field, as well as a potential addition to town hall, just to see what the soil content is, as well as bearing capacity, things like that, for a new foundation. And we have a survey of the property, all that's needed to see what we can actually do with this parcel, what other alternatives we have. And the designer has brought to us, the building committee, a few concept designs. They went around to each department head and figured out what space needs and what programming, what they were, each department were recommending as well. And then they kind of fitted into like a puzzle into this existing envelope. And if there was any additional space needed, they gave us a few design concepts for a proposed addition. Very general, very conceptual, very kind of elementary at this point, but gave us something to look at to just, they're going to have a couple other alternatives, I think, after that meeting that we had. We had some other assignments for them. So on the 30th at 5 o'clock here, we should be looking at a couple other alternatives. So public meeting if anybody's interested in coming. So.
And did you get the written report from the structural engineer yet?
Well, we didn't get the written report, but what we were told was the structural engineers did not find any major concerns at this point.
We did a straw vote on the second floor.
The 700,000 is continue into more of a design instead of that's all design, OPM service work.
Any permitting that might be needed.
Permitting, bringing the design, the conceptual design into schematic design, into design development, to formulate and bring the plans forward, to tighten up.
Are we going to get buildable documents from them? Is that the end goal?
Yeah, construction ready document.
Yeah, with that,
Documents.
I think we're getting fairly close to having everything ready to go for
Okay.
construction, yes.
And Bill was just saying, Nick, and you were talking there, but we made a kind of a straw poll at the meeting on Tuesday. Tim was asking for some guidance about the second floor offices, a community, kind of a theater space, and this and that. And as a board, we decided that the best use would be another meeting room or some conference rooms with some offices as well, instead of a open kind of community theater activity space. Just because we think we've got a community house, I think everyone was kind of thinking it, and the best use would be offices and a better meeting room for the selectmen or other boards to meet in.
Yeah, with the idea of this room would be
This would become offices.
so.
Does this include an elevator for ADA compliance?
The project does, yes,
Okay.
yes, yep.
So when is the goal to have a budget that we can start to think about for the actual work?
I think once we get a concept design kind of decided and agreed upon to move into a little forward, they can give all preliminary numbers, but as soon as you have more of a concept and into more of a schematic design level, they can get, they'll bring on a cost estimator and actually give us some fairly accurate estimates for the construction. So we haven't really figured out what level of the size of the addition or the, where, what's the basement use, what's the second floor use. Those are things that we needed to know prior to them really going forward with an actual design that they can really put a number to.
By 2021, we'll have probably be about, we're talking about the budget next year for the project.
Yes.
Yep.
That's correct. Yep.
Just because it's stunning to me, is 700,000 is what it's gonna take just to do architectural drawings?
It is
Design work?
an OPM, yep.
Yeah, it's a lot, right? And
Yep.
just some advice that you probably already know, though. I'm thinking of our last big project was the Veterans Memorial Pool. And when that came to town meeting the first time, there was a lot of hubbub about that it was over the top and way too much. And I would recommend that you really sharpen the pencil before you bring it to us in the town, because I'm thinking of the referring to it as Disneyland or something like that before.
Yeah.
So, I think an à la carte kind of a thing for different parts of
As
town
much as we
hall.
can, we will. Yeah, I mean-
very much think about,
Yep.
keep it as a smaller package if we can, so that it's a little bit easier for people to digest.
I mean, we're looking at, that's the intention, is to keep it and make it, try to use as much of this building as possible with the space that we have, and any additional space, what's the best scenario? Is it an addition that it just is an elevator, a staircase, and maybe a new clerk vault?
Right.
Or is it a larger addition that houses other offices if needed? Trying to figure out where possibly DPW stays here, or do we modify the building out back? Those are things that we kind of need to talk about as a group, and that second floor was a big piece of that, because that's a large space that we're either keeping open or using as office space and meeting space. So that's kind of gave us a good direction right there, so.
As long as we remain practical about it, right? So-
That's right. That's right. And I understand, I mean, it's a large project, and I think people have to understand it's going to be a multi-million-dollar project.
Right.
And that's, a lot of it is historic, prevailing wages, and just the cost of these projects. And I think, our goal is to have that information out in the public as soon as we can, and allow them to collaborate with the group, with the committee, understand that cost, because there is a sticker shock. Regardless of what the project costs, it's going to be multi-million-dollar project. And I think bringing people along and having them understand why it costs so much, and past projects that they've worked on, having that information in front of them, and the impact to the residents.
Right, and I think
things
the
like
kind of, the more opportunity we give people to digest that and give input to it, the better. And I think this should be something we continually talk about and keep on our minds as it goes along.
Yep. And Joe and I have talked, that we want to make sure that we are comfortable with what we're putting forward, as well as it's timed appropriately.
Right.
I don't want to put anything out if we're not ready to go, and,
No, I
and
agree.
if the public hasn't seen it or hasn't had time to digest it.
Right, and then I think that leads back to the conversation we've kind of had about town meeting coming up in April. If you're not ready, don't bring it.
We plan
At
to
least
have-
give an update on it, but
Right.
if it's not fully cooked, don't bring it.
Correct, and I think that's what that is. That will lead us into a discussion at town meeting. Whatever we have ready, we'd like to let the town know where we're at with this project.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I mean, in the 700,000, would be better to tell that story in pieces, right?
Yes.
OPM, architect, engineer, testing,
That's
feasibility study. So that's made up of probably 5 to 10 different buckets, right? So,
And it's based upon a estimate that
Right.
we
Right.
really don't have.
yeah.
At this time, so.
So the number might change between now and then.
And how much have we spent to date on that? And
We have
300?
spent close, maybe 40, 50,000.
That's it, okay.
Yeah, that's OPM services, a small amount of design, and then some of these other smaller things that I've talked about, the
Testing,
hazmat,
the
and
water,
soil, and,
Yeah, that seems very reasonable for what, but when you jump in with 700, he's absolutely correct. Break it down.
right, yep, that's the high-level design,
So-
so we'll
So
make sure
it's
that
in the
happens.
budget now, and it's being proposed now, but if we get the feeling that we're not gonna be able to give you enough of a story on it, we can pull it. I'm not willing to go to town meeting and ask for money when we don't have all the facts and figures together. We don't know what we're asking for.
Right.
So,
And I
The
also
goal is to have
applied,
enough information, excuse me, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Tim. The goal is to have enough information to be able to ask for a sum of money to continue the design and planning of it. I do not expect us to be asking for the whole enchilada and, hey, this is what the design's gonna be and this is where everybody's gonna live.
Right.
It's to kind of get us to the next step, but it's gonna be based on known factors and, you know, at least a concept of a design or two that people can start to debate and discuss. So.
right, and I've also applied to CPC for additional design and OPM service money. So that could potentially adjust or, you know, revise the number that capital ask, so.
Great.
Thank you.
Could I just ask a question about the water treatment plant, the 1.
What we're here for.
Sure.
If you could just give us an overview of what the 1.5 for
Yep.
the water treatment plant, and is that the old basin?
The existing,
The existing
water
basin.
treatment.
So water, yeah, we actually, I can bring you up to speed on that. We've pretty much 99% completed that project that we were working on. Very successful. We've had very good quality water coming out of the plant. What we've noticed, and I think it's environmental, it's drought conditions, our organics have increased in our wells. Our plant was not designed to take out organics from the get-go, from the original plan. We have noticed that the organic levels are starting to increase, or have increased slightly over time. So we are trying to stay ahead of how do we deal with those organics. And then what that number is it's basically a number for a pre-treatment. It would be another part of the process. Prior to it coming into the plant, the raw water would be pre-treated to remove the organics. Therefore, that would allow our plant to be able to treat the water more effectively. That 1.5 is, there's two types of project that we're looking at. The 1.5 is the larger of the projects. There might be the potential of a smaller project that might achieve the same effectiveness. We have a design, we have an engineer on board that's looking at both scenarios. Hopefully we get to have more information in front of us to make that decision of if the smaller system would be effective, or do we have to go to more of a larger pre-treatment process.
Thank you.
And that would come out of the usage charges would go up to cover that, or?
That's something that we would have to talk about. That's correct, yeah.
So the budget proposal right now calls for water rates for this coming fiscal year to stay the same. But in anticipation of one of these projects, you would have to probably use some retained earnings to make a bond payment this year, a bond anticipation note payment this year. And then in FY21, we'd be looking to bond it, and then you probably need to see a corresponding rate increase on the water side to handle that cost.
Does our debt service drop off at a certain time on that right now? Right now, it seems to be
Service
growing every year.
schedules are not my thing.
They're actually under the other tab if you want to see all the outstanding debt that we have.
Where's that?
related to the
Last
water.
page there.
Other, okay.
Yeah. It's actually the last section of that.
That seemed a little bit quick. I apologize
20,
for my answer there.
37, so it's a ways.
It's a ways, yeah.
So for water, we have $5.8 million outstanding currently.
So could we discuss a rate structure change for water this fiscal year?
Say that again?
And there, here's my thinking, when, it's a brain fart I'm having, so you may all just totally disagree with me, and I'm fine with that. But I was thinking about it, currently, I believe we're billed quarterly, and it's $60 per household per quarter for the fee, correct?
That's correct.
So, what it doesn't account for is we have multi-units on 1 meter in some cases. So multiple households get a $60 fee, and single households get a $60 fee. So I was wondering, and I don't know if it's, I was wondering if we could charge different rates, or charge unit rates. For example,
Instead of a meter rate, a unit rate.
a unit rate. because the additional units are usually income providers for the entity, whether it be a single-family home with an approved apartment, or it be a multi-unit. So to me, I believe it would be more of a fairness factor to all residents that every unit receives a fee versus a meter fee. So I was thinking that we could, if we did that, we could generate more income this year, and but also it would do some fairness. So as for Gordon as an example, I think all of Gordon property is probably 6 meters maybe. I'm not positive, but somewhere around, less than 10.
There's several up there, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's less than 10. It's not a major number. But they have 211 apartments. So for each of their housing units, they pay per quarter is probably $60 for each building versus each unit. And
Jeff figured out the other one was like
15.
12 or 15,000.
12 just for that.
Yeah,
no,
12,000 just for-
significant. So I was thinking, if you did, say you did multiple units, you charged $100 a quarter
Mhm.
for each unit.
It's round numbers, yeah.
That's $85,000 just at Gordon.
For quarter, yeah, per quarter, yeah.
But it also, it's not, it really is, I was trying to look at it as a fairness thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as a baseline, yeah.
So, I agree to rearrange all your water rates and all that. You would look at me and say, Allison, are you kidding me for FY20? But it was just a thought I had, and I thought it may be something to look at for FY20. And because we know we're short this year a little bit on our water, so we know we're gonna be short next year on our water and take it from the tax rate.
I think it's a good idea.
I think the general idea is correct, but you may have to fiddle around with the rates, because you're now talking about a unit that might be fairly small that you're charging $60, and a house that you're charging $60. Is that the same value? You know,
Well, the
and that's-
apartments
and that's the
are,
only thing.
the apartments up there that I'm talking about mostly are 2 and 3 bedrooms with children. So they're using the same water as the single-family homes in essence. And Gordon takes in over $2 million in profit for those.
I see you're focusing in Gordon.
No, and I'm not. It's just an example. But I think that any of our apartments, which we don't have a lot of other apartments, it's the same thing. It should not be, if there's a 4-unit apartment downtown, they're only charged for one.
I understand,
So-
but it may not be that they should be charged the same as a house across the street for one of those apartments. That's all I'm wondering about in terms of fairness.
So if
Be by bedrooms.
I just did want to say that after the Selectmen's meeting on Tuesday, I did
Yeah.
put the question to Donna Brewer. So as soon as I have an answer from her on the legality of it, I'll let you know whether it's the road we continue to go down, okay?
Fabulous.
I think it's a great idea.
Food for thought.
Yep.
All right. Other things for Tim?
Wine water.
While he's up there, Tim, do you want to just give us the rationale for the additional head?
We have a small apartment.
Yeah, I have a,
Right to the point.
Well, you know, he's up there, right?
He's up there, right?
Question, I missed it.
I think I have it. There's just some key points. What I have in front of you is just some key essential functions of this position. I've had some time. I've been here a few years. Part of my job when I got here, one of my assignments was to evaluate the department and to look at where the gaps or needs are. And I think I'd love to have a couple more guys out back. They do a good job. They keep up. We have a lot more and more with less and less in the way. So what I've tried to do is looked at the assignments in front of me as well as what are really time, where I focus a lot of my time and how to best use my time. A lot of my time is out, trees and pavement and things like that that are specific things, specific tasks that I would like to have some other assistance with, that a little higher level assistance, be able to possibly procure documents or services. Not the special projects, the bigger projects would still probably come to me, but having somebody in the office that would be able to answer some emails based upon the projects that we're looking at or we're working on. Being able to cover for me if I'm out on a project or at a meeting or at a conference. If I'm out of the office, a lot of things just kind of wait till I get back. The position I'm looking for is being able to then work with our crews, being able to assign them some additional or work, gain services, be able to bring guys over to do some projects in-house, be able to assign work, plan for the future, be able to be a little bit more proactive than reactive. I look at it this way: I have this much work and I have one person to do that. I need to have a second person to be able to assign work to, and to be able, I can say, hey, you take this, you come back to me. I know it's in good hands and you're going to take care of it. You're going to get the work done if it's either contract services or in-house services. Look at a lot of other towns around. I mean, pretty much every town on the North Shore has a second in charge. So even smaller towns than this, they either have an assistant director or an operations manager or somebody that can kind of work with the director, making sure things are done efficiently and successfully, be the eyes and ears for that person. And I look at, working with Joe, since he's been here, we have some pretty good sized projects ahead of us. I'm having to try to prioritize the projects based upon my time, which that is a little bit of an issue for me and myself. I want to get these projects done. I want to do them timely, but also I only have a certain amount of time to do them. And I could have my whole day planned and my whole week planned and come in Monday and I've got some other issue to deal with, and then that just goes away.
That was my question. How much of it is because of the reactionary stuff, the calls you get that you didn't plan on?
A lot of it is, that takes a lot of my time. Mm-hmm. So I would love to have somebody there to be able to keep going with something, and I can handle that. That's part of my job, is to handle that reaction of the residents' requests or concerns.
Right.
But there's only so much that I can, obviously one person can do. So this position would do a little higher level work, similar to what, could be doing the same similar tasks as myself, but would be working with me as a kind of a right hand, be able to assign them specific tasks or specific projects, and also cover if we have two projects going on, which is not out of the ordinary. I can't be at both spots. I'm having to take some of my crew and go cover and go watch an installation of some roofing or pipe or water pipe and things like that. So it's a lot of, and I kind of generalize some tasks on that paper. But I think if you want to kind of summarize it, I just need a second person to be able to handle some of what my essential duties are.
You're also the procurement officer, right?
That's correct.
For town.
Yep.
So and what percentage of your time is that?
Procurement is a good, Mass and Allison can vouch for me. It's not getting less.
Right.
It's just continuing to get more and more. The requirements are time consuming to be able to put it out correctly to keep the town in conformance with Mass law. It depends on what the project is. The town hall project took a long time because of this series of steps that we have to do. Some of the other smaller stuff, the service contracts and things like that, are fairly quick, and that would be what this position could possibly help me with, is just keeping the catch basin cleaning, the street sweeping, the annual contracts, keeping them up to date, putting them out you know, in accordance to the, you know, I'd like this position to have a little bit of procurement knowledge, if it's upon hire, or even just an overview with a little bit of training. But it would be nice to be able to bounce some ideas off somebody and work with them to get these smaller things out, or, it's consuming. I mean, there's positions in towns that's all they do.
I can attest. So I worked upstairs in your area. I would support this position. I think you also took on facilities.
That's right.
And as a whole department, but you didn't receive any supervisory then. So I fully support it, but I would fully support it if we also gained some efficiencies in reporting and
That's right.
Like a ticketing
fix
system.
Yeah, right.
and
We talked about that the other day.
understand our aging items and working with your workforce maybe to use more computer-based things to get you up to the right. So I think you could definitely use this person, and if you use this person, we would gain efficiencies another way, if that's how we choose to hire and see that person.
Right. Part of, I mean, and you know, that I brought on a work order system and a GIS system. I still use it. I would like to use it more, or even have it more used by the guys out back. I find that a lot of my GIS work, or updating the plans and maps, I'm having to outsource it because I can't use it as much as I would like to. Use it for efficiencies purposes. The work order system, it's a great system. I'm finding that it could be a little bit better from when something comes in to when it goes out to the crew, but then the follow-up is where a lot of it is, you know, the follow-up to the citizen or to the contractor, to the crew. That whole circle can be better, and I think having some more, obviously, staff to help me with that, and specifically looking at those type of things.
Yeah, I think it would do, and it would, yeah, it would help residents in contacting residents. It's that second person behind you, because I know your list is like this, so that we send out that notice that says, we've flushed water hydrants, don't use your water. It's, so the more continuous care, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree too. I think that with another person, you could probably do 3 times as much work, right? So all the time you spend in the car or in meetings or whatever. So I agree that this town needs, I mean, I just can list 8 projects or significant projects you're working on. I think to sell it at town hall, I think maybe you need to work more on like either a resource, you know, chart, resource loading chart, either by hour or by task, or some sort of org chart, either by person or by. So I think this is good, but I think for the next step, I think maybe some sort of charter graph to sort of show how many hours or how many tasks they're doing at one time might be
I think the org chart would be good.
an org chart.
We're working that. Well, he actually started.
I got some examples I can share with you.
Sure. So the genesis of this was when we sat down with John at the department head meetings. It had been my suggestion to Tim that he needed a second, and John will attest to this. Tim's first reaction was, "Well, I need more labor."
Right.
And he and I went back and forth for about 6 weeks. Him trying to make the case that he needed a guy more than he needed. But as we kept trying to determine what is it that we want this position to do, what is it that we're trying to take off of Tim's shoulders, he finally came back on his own and said, you know, I do need an assistant director. I can't do it with just an extra body. It needs to be somebody who can do the things that I can do. And so that's why this has remained in this presentation. We'll get you an org chart. We will also get you kind of a list of some other things that we might be able to cut back on as this person takes on more of a role. We have union guys who are on call sometimes and are the ones that organize the work in the middle of the night. That would probably become this assistant director's job, and that keeps us from having to pay overtime starting at 10 o'clock at night.
That's important, because my first reaction, my knee-jerk reaction is, if we're going to be paying about $600,000 over the next 5 years, what are we getting that we didn't have last year? What's different from last year to 6 years from now? And that's the kind of a question that goes through my head. And I think the ways that you've just org chart, the savings that you would have, the tasks that you could do, that might be important.
But I think part of that's what we're getting, but I think he's been working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week too, so I think that's part of it.
I think
There's
helping having a.
Tim and I came up with an example too. There, the town converted to LED streetlights a few years ago. We are now finding out that maybe if we had somebody in this kind of a role, whoever was here before, who oversaw that project, would have had more time to do it. We're running into a lot of replacement costs on the heads that we weren't expecting. That it was an issue of not having the previous director being spread too thin to effectively look at what was being proposed for the equipment on the poles, right? And
Correct.
so now we're paying for something that we weren't anticipating paying on a maintenance end. So, that's been about $15,000 to $20,000 more than we expected to just this year. So now we're working with the provider to try and get it fixed. By the time we make the fix, whatever extra amount of money that's going to cause. If we had 2 people in this kind of a role, in this kind of working in a tandem there, the director at the time might have been able to do a little bit better job and make sure that we got what we needed as opposed to what everybody else in the region was getting. So.
Right. I mean, and along the same lines, I mean, there's things that, the new stormwater permit, for example. That's an unfunded mandated permit from the EPA. It's just another task that I need to do that needs certain year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 compliance. Every year year 1 you have to have all this said and done to be in conformance with the permit. Well, it's great, but they just keep, it's more and more, like I was saying earlier, and that's things that are out of my control. It's out of the town control, it's the federal government putting a permit on here for Clean Water Act. Where do you fit? Something's got to give, is what I'm getting at, is if I have to do this now, then I can't focus on this.
One of your things was that you had major projects coming up, and then one way to relieve that might be to have a project manager come in, a temp come in for a period of time for that. That's another way to do it, but that may not be a holistic.
Yeah, I think we still have operational issues, and we need somebody that can work across all the different departments. If Tim has an issue with trees or roads, he's got to go to the highway foreman. If he has an issue with the cemetery or the park, that's a different person. That's just extra people he needs to talk to. For Tim to be able to start the day saying to one person, these are the things we need to get done today, and then that person goes and has those conversations so he can focus on the procurement, on the projects, on meeting with engineers, meeting with me, meeting with whoever else needs. And there's just a lot of operational work that needs to be overseen. And if he's doing his time doing that, if he's leaving here to go check on a tree that fell down in order to assign the work, then that takes him away from other administrative duties that we need.
Wasn't there some funding sources, like that water culvert project, that some state funding that we weren't able to?
Yeah, we had.
As previous director didn't have time to.
The culvert project, the Bridge Street culvert project, we're right now scrambling to redo our hazard mitigation plan so that we can get some additional reimbursement from the federal government, because that lapsed during the period of time that the work was going on, and it was just one of those, an extra thing that nobody had a minute to put eyes on. We started the project, the HMP was in place, the federal government signed off on it, you start doing the work, next thing you know, you get into a few things that cause the project some delays that are beyond your control, and then by the time we wrap up the project, the HMP's out. So now we've been reimbursed for a bunch of it, but we still got costs out there that we can't get reimbursed until we update the mitigation plan.
And that would have paid for a year or 2 of his position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about
there's
$120,000.
We need to know about.
There's
I think you're right, Bill, we have to
about
sell it.
$160,000
Right,
we
you
can
have
get
to
sell it with
to
that type
get
of
that plan done.
information.
But we'd have it in our bank account right now if we
Yeah,
did,
if we had the plan,
we had the
and we
plan.
had somebody else to help.
up to date, so.
In my experience, I was in Rockport as Assistant Director of Public Works. So I was in the position that I'm looking for. I know how good of a help I was to the director. I know how much he appreciated my assistance and my help for dealing with some things, daily functions, daily contractors, capital projects, whatever it was. I just, coming here, I've talked to him a few times, and he's seen how things are going and how you doing over there, and I'm like, man, I really miss me. I don't know how else to say it, but there's a lot of deep. I can't put my finger. It's very hard to put your finger on exactly what this position would do and the exact things that this person would help me with, because DPW is everything. I mean, it's a lot of multiple things, and it grows. You never know what tomorrow's going to bring. I mean, I was in Rockport, and I had to deal with a whale on a beach. I mean, I know, hopefully we won't ever have that, but those are things. I mean, that,
Whale here, we're in trouble.
the director just said, take care of it. That you got to take care of it. I got this to do. I have something, a conference, whatever it was, take care of that. And that's, I have to do that here. I would have to take time to take care of that. It's just having a second person to bounce ideas off, management level ideas.
So Tim, one more question. So, and we appreciate your hard work. I know you're not looking for accolades or pats on the back. You do a good job, but I mean, just so we understand, I mean, you're without an assistant, you're working 7 days a week. I mean, is that what you're doing? No vacation?
Well, I'm on call.
Yeah.
I mean, my phone. I got a computer on my phone. I mean, I'm on call 7 days a week. Yeah, and that's part of my job. I'm 24/7. I understand that, and that's not really what I'm looking. That's not a concern of mine because that's part of my job. Okay. The concern is if I have certain things, deadlines that need to get done, something happen. I don't have anybody that I can. Hey, I got to take this. I got to get this done. I got to get back to this resident. I got to go the EPA deadlines, the ASR annual statistics report, whatever. It takes a lot of time that I know for firsthand in Rockport that the director just said, hey, Tim, can you take that? And yeah, I can do that for you. I don't have that position here. And we have quite a bit of work. We have quite a bit of infrastructure, square miles and things like that. We're actually larger than Rockport. They're a little bit more condensed. But I mean, I looked at other communities that have similar geographic as well as infrastructure, lane miles, infrastructure needs. Every one of those communities has a second person, and I talked to the directors. I know them personally, and that is the most valuable person to them. And I don't have that, and so I have to. And my second are the union foreman, and that's another level of complexity right there. So,
agreed.
So, would it be? I see it in my brain as someone technologically strong but who has a very strong managerial side.
Correct.
Do you see it as needing an engineering background?
Nope.
Okay.
College
Perfect.
degree, but not
Yeah,
engineering.
I mean, a lot of it too is
years of experience.
Years of experience.
If I get to, there's
yeah.
a foreman somewhere who started 15 years ago and has been doing the job, then we could take him too. That's fine.
As long as my thing is you really need to get the technological efficiencies and really have somebody who can work with your men and
that's the key.
day-to-day.
Absolutely,
Because
because this
telling me you needed an assistant.
Essentially, what you're saying is increase efficiencies through technology.
Yeah.
and I've started that, and it's there.
But
It can be better with given more time.
and more management of it.
And yeah,
You know,
right, correct.
I started out telling him too, he needs an assistant principal. You know, the assistant principal was the one that was kind of the taskmaster. If you got in trouble at school, you went and saw him. You know, he doesn't have that. He can't be both things. He's got to be the even-keeled department head to make sure everything's chugging along. But at the same time, sometimes you need somebody to a little bit be the heavy or a little bit respond to a concern in a way that. So he needs that as well, and he just doesn't have it. You know, the other thing is that strong organizations have resiliency built in, and we don't have that right now. Right. Particularly in DPW. You know, the police department does. Obviously, we're seeing that the fire department did because we were able to elevate somebody to the chief rank that was there. If Tim were to leave tomorrow, we don't have anybody that could even on a temporary basis fill in for him. So to make this a resilient organization.
But I think
Allison in on a contract, that would be okay,
Yeah.
but we should be looking to make that part of our organization more resilient, and it isn't yet. So.
Right. And what I've heard from guys in the back, they've said that, you know, new director, start over. That's basically what has happened, is a new director comes in, and, you know, if it was a couple years ago, there's been a little bit of turnover, but there was no person that had been here that could possibly step up and at least continue the projects for a while. It fell on the shoulders of Chief and Michael for a while, the town manager. I come in and I take over, but they kind of have it's a little joking mentality out there that a new director, we've already heard this. We're doing it again, you know, or it's a start over. It's a new, you know, instead of continuation. The town has, that's why our water system needed a lot of work, because it fell off. It fell away from, somebody was working on it, they left, no one picked it up. And this position would be able to fill in for, you know, if I take a couple days off or I'm at a conference, but also, you know, it's just somebody else in a succession plan. I have no intention of going anywhere. I just wanted to know that. I have no intention of letting him go so, just to have somebody be able to
It adds some
carry on.
growth to your department, which sometimes motivates people too, that like your foremen have nowhere to go.
That's right.
So it would give them an opportunity to see they might have somewhere to go. You know, that helps employees as well, I think.
Morale helps people
Yeah.
work harder.
Yeah.
Tim, are you most likely thinking this is an external hire? It sounds like there's,
You know,
know until you post.
I'll put it out,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm not sure, I don't know if we have anybody that would be interested in it or not. It would be something that I would put out, and hopefully be a very competitive process and get ultimately the best candidate with either construction experience, municipal experience, degree. You know, personality is a lot of it, is being able to handle the back and forth, the middleman, if you want to call it that. Working at the management level, but then also at the operational level.
Right.
So it's somebody that would have to be the right fit, and I plan to put it out and go through that process to find that right person.
What's your salary range?
I think what we put in.
79 to start, 79.8 on a
Yeah, I
step
think
one.
Is that going to be high enough?
Actually budgeted 83.
83.
Yeah, I think it was a grade,
So
I
like a
believe
step 3
16.
then?
Step 3 was an 83, I think
Yep.
was
83, 54,
what we
40.
budgeted.
Okay.
I think we
It's right here, is the
we may
Oh,
be
yes.
close there. Looking at what, you know, I started with in Rockport, looking at some of the other towns, it seems like that's a fairly
It's a pretty good range.
competitive salary. Would get a lot of, get some people that'd be interested in it. Yeah. That's my only concern, is it not having any interest.
Right.
And then now where, is it the job, is it the salary, what, you know, so we want to make sure we, the boss, yeah, so. So.
range is 679.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. Thumbs up. Anybody have any other questions for Tim?
I don't.
No, I think we all kind of,
Yep.
I'm speaking for everybody, I think, but I think we all kind of agree that there's a need for it. You know, it's just getting the town meeting to approve it for you, which, you know, we'll do our best to lobby for you, because it's definitely a needed thing. And like Nick was asking about kind of what can we see dollar-wise for savings, I think it's tough to quantify, because a lot of it's efficiencies or things that come up, like you said, with the streetlights. We didn't anticipate that, but if we had somebody there, we're not recognizing that cost until it
I don't-
comes up, but that could have saved us, you know, so.
I don't think, that's, you're right, that's going to be a hard thing to.
Hard to
go,
quantify.
You know, how much savings will this position, I mean, it's
I think it's
savings,
just-
it's
There are
savings.
a couple of things that we're talking about here is just
Activity.
the number of tasks and identifying what they are. Continuity, I think, is a huge issue, and I think
Yeah.
that's something we, you know, I think should be highlighted,
Yep.
because of not having that continuity, you can talk about water systems, you can talk about the culvert. There's a number of places where you don't have that support.
I see so many pros to this.
Too.
You know, the only con I see is we're spending more money. And that's really the only thing I
It's
can
an
think of.
investment.
I think we're
It's an
spending the
investment.
save.
I think we're spending the save. I
Yeah,
think that's a good
absolutely.
point,
And
you know.
we joke with Tim about him not being, you know, his lack of brevity, but quite frankly, the reason he gets up here and he has to talk for a while is he's got a lot to do.
Got a lot to talk about. I
mean,
remember the first time we brought Tim
does.
in to talk to us
So-
and give us an update. I thought we were gonna be here till midnight. And he only went over half the stuff he was doing.
What time is it, noon? Time to go home?
Time to go home.
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on, and I try to keep up, and when I came here, there was a lot undone. And I've tried to put that together, and I appreciate everybody at least hearing me, and I look forward to hopefully having some assistance and some help, because I definitely think we need it as a town. Not just me, but as a town. There's
I think
things that are.
if we pitch it as kind of an investment in savings, really, I think that's the way to go, because, you know, like you said, if you're doing one thing and you've got your assistant doing these other things, keeping kind of the train running on time, those things are going to be a lot quicker and faster, and will save money in the long run.
I mean,
so.
if you keep pushing things down the road and do them later, they get more expensive down the road.
That's right.
That's definitely.
So,
Absolutely. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, so we left off on this at the capital budget, and we've already talked about the water enterprise budget, so we'll jump ahead to financial reserves and call Marissa back up. Mainly, I'm not trying to deflect here, but Marissa worked with the Finance Commission and the Board of Selectmen very hard on the new policies, and these reserves are kind of reflective of that, so I'll let her take her turn at the mic.
So these next couple of slides are actually the result of the financial policies that were adopted this past fiscal year. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of where we're at with free cash. So our free cash was certified September 20th at $2.7 million. We're proposing on this budget that we would use $900,000 of free cash, which would leave us with an unappropriated free cash balance of about $1.8 million, and it represents 5.7% of the general fund budget. If you recall from the policies that were adopted, the target was to keep about 5%. So we're right around that target. The $900,000 free cash use is mostly for the transfers that we're proposing for the General Stabilization Fund, and then Capital Stabilization Fund. We don't have one yet, but if we do decide to move forward with it, then a portion of that would go into the Capital Stabilization Fund as well.
What?
Of that
The free cash.
free cash. And I actually have the numbers right below it. So stabilization fund, the current balance is about $800,000. The proposed article would be to transfer free cash in the amount of $321,963, and that would represent about 3.5% of our general fund budget. Our target is to be at about 5%. That's what our financial policies stated. So for 3.5% slowly, we can get there.
Is that the 321,963 just math? It's just to get us to 3.5%? You just backed into that number? It's a very specific number, 321,963. I'm just wondering how you.
No, the calculation. So our policies state that at a minimum we're going to put 1% of our total budget into the stabilization fund. We can put more if we want, but at a minimum we would start with actually I'm lying, not 1%, 0.5%. But we're doing 1%.
We're starting with 1%.
We're started with 1%.
Okay.
We're not there yet.
But our policy said that at a minimum we should do 0.5%.
First year.
First year, we said, okay, let's do 1%, plus we know we have the free cash capacity.
Right.
We're a little over the 5%, which is not bad, and we're saying that at a minimum, we want to be at 5%. So, but we also want to reach a 5% in the stabilization fund. So that's how we came up with that number. And it's pretty similar with the capital stabilization as well. It's 3% of the general operating budget, net of debt on capital investment allocations. So it's also very specific calculation
Right.
for those two numbers.
Okay.
So the next one is the Capital Stabilization Fund, which we're proposing that $570,659 actually is transferred from free cash into the Capital Stabilization Fund. And per our financial policies, the target should be a minimum of the annual asset depreciation. So our fiscal year 18 financial statements, our governmental assets depreciation is about $1,065,000. So we would be pretty much about half of where we should be on our first year. And then the last slide is the water.
Satisfied with that?
Yeah, I'm satisfied with that.
It's a lot better than what we have now, which
Right,
is nothing.
it's nothing, right, so.
And then the Water Enterprise Fund, we're projecting, so this obviously this is all based on projection, but we're projecting that our fiscal year 2020 ending balance would be about $1 million. The target should be the minimum of 20% of the operations budget, but it should be significantly higher if there's major infrastructure projects ahead of us, which, as you just heard about, there's two major ones. So, and that's
You can talk about because the history of
the free
tax
cash?
rate, yeah.
Okay. So those are the two slides on the financial reserves, the transfers that we're proposing, and they're pretty much all, like as I mentioned, based on the adopted financial policies. The next few slides are actually some slides that, well, a couple of them, we actually used to present them at the town meeting. They probably might be presented at town meeting again. But the next slide is actually new. I put together the slide because of the tax rate, to show what the trend has been on the tax rate, but also because there used to be a lot of free cash used to reduce the tax rate. And that's what we're trying to get away from doing. I mean, the Division of Local Services, they do not recommend that you use free cash to balance or to reduce your tax rate. Also, we've been trying for the last couple of years, we've really been trying to tighten up our budget. So if we're tightening up our budget, we're not going to generate free cash, so we're not going to have that free cash to apply to the tax rate. So I just put this slide together, and you'll see that the first year that I have there is fiscal year 15. There was $1.4 million that was used of free cash to reduce the tax rate. And by using that $1.4 million free cash to reduce the tax rate was still higher than what it is now.
Right.
And for fiscal year 20, we're recommending to not use free cash,
And we're at 1693.
and we're still
Lower.
below what it was in fiscal year 15 with the use of $1.4 million free cash.
So we're doing much better.
Not falsely, yeah. It's not a false.
Yeah, not a false rate, really. And that year 15, was that the year we got money back from the schools?
Must have been.
I think it must have been, because I think we put a bunch
Money
back
back from
that
what?
year. The schools. The schools over budgeted.
They
by
had that huge E&D.
Yeah, but I think
John
that was,
Wayne
I think
But-
that was,
Was that even before that?
long before that, yeah. Like 13 or something.
I mean, I think that was the highest, so,
Yeah.
you know, it could have been from the school, but that was the highest one. But then 16 used
There's a lot. I mean, those last-
650,000, 17, 750,
Yeah.
and so on. So I just thought it was a good slide to put in perspective the free cash use and where the tax rate has been. The next slide is just the tax rate trend. So you can see it in a graph for visual purposes. Some people like the visual. And then the next slide was actually a request that Allison had from the Tuesday's meeting, from the Board of Selectmen's meeting. It was to actually provide a breakdown of where your tax rate dollar is going. So we have the previous 3 years, so 18, 19, and what we're projecting for 20. And the breakdown is there by function, so general government, public safety, education, public works, and so on. Under unclassified, I tried to segregate the major items that are listed under unclassified on our town warrant, which is the capital debt service requirement, health. Those are really the big dollars under that section. And you'll see right there that starting with $9.56 in 18, going to $9.85 and $9.80 in 20, it's the Hamilton Wyndham Regional School District. So more than half of the tax rate is going to education.
This is a great breakdown, both of these.
That-
This one here with the just overall, and then this one here that's itemized is
This one doesn't look as nice because I did it.
But no,
I
I
did it
think,
about 15 minutes before the meeting this morning.
no, but I think they're both wonderful. I mean, it makes a huge difference, I think, for me, and I think for anybody looking at this budget to see really where everything's going and where it has been
I
over the
think
last
for
couple of years.
explaining it to the town.
Yeah,
at
exactly.
town meeting, this would be really
Great
helpful.
educational
Yeah,
moment here
very
with
helpful.
this.
And that
Thank you.
transfers includes the money from free cash into the capital stabilization fund and the other stabilization fund, that's
Yeah.
why that's up above.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something to pay attention to is when you look at the total budget and you see, oh, it's 7.6% increase. It really isn't, because we didn't have these transfers last year, and these transfers are almost $1 million. So what I did on one of your
Somewhere
on
there's a
the
breakdown,
green
right?
book, there's a section that actually gives you what the percentage is in total,
Yeah.
but then it also gives you what the percentage increase is without the transfers. Because these transfers are not affecting the tax rate. They're simply going from free cash from one bucket to the other. So, and
Whereas
we
in
did.
previous years, they
we didn't-
went against the tax rate and helped bring it down, so we have to, yeah,
Yes.
I mean, we're doing the right thing now, I think, I agree. We've got this money, it's taxpayer money, we should put it away so that we can use it going forward.
Yeah.
Allison, did you have something to add?
Thank you very much. Can't believe you did this much detail that quickly. The only thing I would add is, I think if others agree that this presentation's fabulous, it's great for town meeting, but I think this data should be up either on the treasurer collector's website page or on the assessor's website page. Like, it should be a standing, so everyone
It's always there,
understands
and you
it.
just update it
So
every
this
year.
was just created.
Totally agree, yeah.
This was just created this week for you guys.
Yep.
But as has been my history since I got here in September, everything we do goes right onto the website. So this stuff will all be there Monday.
Great.
No, and I agree. What I'm saying is when you pull up to pay your taxes on the
specific
treasurer collector's,
breakdown.
you
People see
see
the
this,
history.
you
Right.
see something like this on that slide.
Where's your money going,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
just,
helpful for
just this,
people.
just this right there.
Yes.
Boom.
Right.
Exactly.
Here's your tax rate. Here's where it goes.
When you pull it up today, it says your tax rate is 1648, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think that we're always reminding them that this is where we spend your money in a very quick overview.
Yep.
Would be fabulous.
I don't know how to reconcile these two things. I mean, I do, but I don't know how we explain it. I think what you've shown there on the tax rate divided up by tax rate is informative. But if I look at that and say, oh, my taxes are gonna go up 2.7%. No, they're gonna go up 5% or 6%. And that's the thing that we're missing. We're not quite telling the whole story by this one chart. It's missing the fact that we have an asset appreciation. It's identified on the next page in terms of asset value changes. You can see
Yes.
that the assets went up 5.5%,
Right.
5.8%, 3% over the last 3 years. And that also is part of the tax increase. So
Yeah,
from a,
Right.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
and I think, we know that, but we need to make sure we communicate that so that people aren't saying, oh, yeah, that's,
I think that's one of the toughest things for the general public to understand is assessed value and our evaluations and the tax rate and how that affects the whole matrix of it. It's a very difficult thing to wrap your head around sometimes, I think.
Absolutely.
I know, but it's an important piece.
It is a very important
Because
piece.
I think we got a lot of comments on the tax bills came out a month ago, and some people saying, it's went
Well,
up
the other-
10% or 13%. How's that possible?
So that's the other part of it, right? So our fiscal year and our calendar year tax rate adjustment are off by 6 months. So when you approve a tax rate, it starts on your next bill, but it's trying to recapture all of the increase for the previous year in 2 quarters instead of all 4 quarters. So you kind of wind up with a double hit on the last 2 quarters. You pay the
Right, you're
same rate
behind
in
a
the first
little
2
bit, yeah.
quarters of the fiscal year, and then it gets adjusted on January 1st. So that's where a lot of our disconnect is too. People say, well, it was only 5%, but mine went up 13%. That's because I'm trying to capture the 5% for the year in 1/2 of the year in just 2 quarters. So they don't, residents don't often understand that. So it looks worse than it is.
Right.
If we had spread it out over the year, it would have been half of that.
Right.
But we can't because
Just the way it works, yeah.
One thing that I can't stress enough is that this is an estimated
Right.
tax rate. I was very, very,
Is that more?
Yeah.
yes, I was very, very resistant when I first started to even have this number in any presentation because it can change significantly. I mean, right now this number is based on that we're going to have an increase in our assessed values of 3%.
Right.
Do I know that that's the case? I don't. I mean, it was 5% this past year. I estimated at 3 to be conservative. Could it be 5? Could it go below? You know, you don't know, and that really affects the tax rate. So I just want to stress that it's an estimated number. You also, when you're looking at these numbers, don't forget, if anything else goes to, so this is for annual town meeting. When we go to special town meeting, if we have additional appropriations, they're also going to affect the tax rate.
Right.
So this is not your final number,
Right.
you know.
So I would put a footnote on this.
Yeah, I do have it estimated down there.
So I'm looking at the tax rate breakdown,
Oh, did I not put estimated on that page? I will.
and I would just say,
Yeah.
maybe a little blurb of what you just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, FY '20 estimated, and maybe a little blurb that says it will be affected by, it could be affected by such things as, and just
Yeah.
put those two things out.
Well, I'd probably do it almost two separate places on the town
Okay.
website. So in one place where it shows you the tax rate, you wouldn't even put FY '20.
Correct.
Because it's estimated.
I agree.
You're looking backwards. And then the budget stuff will have a new version of the chart.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great idea.
And just for Marcy taking the minutes here and folks at home, it's 9:30. Scott Mattern just joined us.
Very sorry to you all for being late.
Worries.
No problem.
Actually gonna leave it.
Well, now we can adjourn.
Thanks, Ron.
Good text.
Tim, are you staying for something else, or just general? Oh, okay.
He likes to be with
Good
us.
man.
Okay.
We are
So the next couple of slides, it just again, for visual purposes, what the assessed valuations, what the trend has been. Again, fiscal year '20 is estimated at a 3% increase. The only reason I put it there was so that people could see what we used for the calculation of the tax rate. Excess levy capacity. As you can see, there's a huge drop there. So this is also a number to pay close attention to. In the past, we've had, a large number in excess capacity, and we're slowly or quickly starting to use it. So right now, we're estimating again that it would be about $977,000. But I wanted to make sure that people had this slide in front of them so that they can see how quickly it's dropping.
Is there any way of explaining that simply? I was looking at those calculations on the, on your second page in the summary, and I just don't understand how it drops so quickly. It almost looks scary. And I don't know whether that's a problem or not a problem. I just know it's dropped $2 million in 2 years. Is there an easy way to explain that?
Well, the easy way to
Good or
explain
bad?
really is we have a calculation for what our tax levy could be. It starts with the prior tax levy, then it adds the 2.5%, and then new growth. That would be the max that you could actually tax. We've never actually taxed to that point.
But why did this change so radically? Is it because we switched away from free cash? Is it something else?
Well, it's actually based on our expenditures too, our appropriations. So our budget has been growing, which means that we're getting closer to our tax levy capacity.
But part of what Nick said, I think, is if we had taken, say, the money we put into the two stabilization funds from free cash and put that into reducing the tax rate, the corresponding million would have actually increased
Stayed in
our levy
use,
capacity,
correct.
Right, so
So
that
those
would,
are
so it's
Yes.
part of our
That's it,
trying
that's
to be fiscally conservative and say, let's put this money away, instead of just trying to reduce the tax rate this year, let's put that away for long-term
I gotta tell
savings
you,
in a
what you
sense.
just said makes me feel so much more comfortable.
Right.
Okay,
Right, anytime you see
Here I'm
this
worried,
going, yeah.
And you just said, we've already put that money aside somewhere.
Right.
yeah.
Is what you just said.
Right, and that's, so in essence.
We should explain that.
Yes.
Right. In essence, this has gone down, and that's not a great thing, but at the same time, it's partly because we have saved the money that when we've had left over, and we're putting it into accounts that can be used for specific purposes. So we would have less need for this if we're budgeting smartly and paying
Right,
attention.
we're being a lot more fiscally responsible. That's what this is telling me.
Will this affect our bond rating? I know we have a AAA bond rating. Will any of this movement or calculation will?
Stabilization funds will have a positive
Yeah.
impact. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah.
we can't get better than
Just-
AAA,
good.
but they'll be happy to see the stabilization
Okay, good.
funds increasing.
Yeah, they see that we're
Yes.
putting it somewhere
Yep.
for future use and we're building that capacity. They're gonna like what
That's
they
good.
see with that.
Yes.
They look at everything when they're doing the column rating, and they'll see that this dropped, but they'll see that the money went into stabilizations, and they always look to see if our stabilization funds are at a 5%, sometimes even higher, to see if we're financial stable.
Some towns are at 10 and stuff like that.
Oh,
They're-
absolutely.
or that are.
Actually, the last time I was on the call for our rating, they were looking for 20%, which I thought that was really high.
But most towns budget much closer to their levy
Oh,
capacity.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when Robin Crosby came in, and she and I were having our first preliminary meeting, and she goes, I can't believe you have all this huge excess levy capacity. You know, you're not spending your money, kind of thing. And I-
Yes.
Well, wait a minute, no.
Come on.
No, you think of like
we
Wenham,
want
they're,
that.
they're at their levy all
Well,
the
they're
time.
gonna,
They're looking at an
doing
override, right.
last year and this year, so.
The last town that I worked for, that number was $13,000.
Right below it, yeah.
And
Now you
that's
feel
because
better,
they
Nick, right?
couldn't actually spread that evenly across.
Yeah, and you're worried about almost $1 million, Nick.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be that close, because
No,
if
don't wanna do
our estimates are off,
Yeah.
which happened last year with our revenue estimates, we
Right.
had a particular one that it's kind of on the high side, and if I didn't have that excess levy capacity to balance the tax recap, I wouldn't be able to do it. So, and
All right, next. Some home values, it looks like.
historical information, this was actually a slide. This was a request from the FinCom last year. Actually, I think Phil put this together, if I'm not mistaken. Just to see historically what the tax rate has been, the medium tax bill for the past 4 years. And the last slide is our outstanding debt for enterprise and governmental.
So,
You have a lot more detail in the
the
green,
budget book.
yeah, the green book. If you want, I can give you a quick overview of what's included or not.
What do you think?
We've been through it.
Yeah, we
We had a nice session with Mark and went through the Green Book, I think, in pretty good detail.
Is there
If you
any
have-
higher level stuff you want to share with us? Or
Depends
anything?
on how deep
Depends
in
how
the
deep.
weeds you wanna go.
True.
So our debt seems to drop off pretty quickly. The governmental debt drops off within the next 5 years,
Yes.
it looks like.
We have a
And then we're
couple
gonna,
of,
and then we're gonna put the town hall
It's
beyond there.
already great.
there's a
you
couple
gotta
of
keep
them.
that in mind. The
Yeah.
town hall will wind up being on there at some point, so.
Yeah, I think we've got a handful, like Bill said, they're gonna be dropping off in the next 5 years, but I
Yeah.
think if we're bonding town hall and a couple of these other water projects and stuff like that, we're gonna creep back up to
Yep.
kind of where we were,
Absolutely.
which is okay.
And we don't,
Good to see that some is rolling off and then you're
Right, we're
adding
not
some, so it kind of
Filing
balances
on,
it
right, it
out.
balances it out. That way, we're not spiking any of the tax rate or anything like that with these. Not that the bonding's gonna spike the tax rate, but overall capacity.
So that's our budget proposal for this year. We hope that you'll be able to support it. We remain available to you over the next couple months to answer questions, to work on it, to fine tune it. The process starts with the budget proposal, doesn't end with it. It ends when town meeting gives all of us what we have all agreed to when we get there. So I'm excited. I know that some of the numbers might put people off at first, but I think we've done a pretty good job explaining why they're there. I want you to know that we continue to look for ways to improve our efficiency in our operations. And, you know, those are things that we'll be trying to implement. Some of those are things that we'll be trying to implement this year. I do view the request for human resource function and the assistant DPW director as investments in efficiency. So by having those people, we'll be able to get more better work out of the staff we have already, and it'll help the operation overall. We remain open to suggestions.
So the HR position
Yep.
is really estimated to be a net of about 40,000.
Yeah, give or take. I've always been saying 35, but yeah, somewhere probably between 35 and 40, all in.
All in. That's the objective.
Yes.
So one thing that we haven't discussed here, and it's still being kind of kicked around with the school committee, is the school resource officer. It's in their budget now. We've talked about maybe bringing it into our budget since the person is going to be a Hamilton employee. I
Yep.
still think that's the right thing to do.
I do too,
If we get
actually.
some reimbursement from Wenham on that, that'd be great. But we've been pushing it. It's all been through our chief safety officer, Chief Stevens. And I'm wondering, what's the process here in working out with the schools on where that goes, whose budget that is, and how we want to handle that?
I think their thought on why it was in their budget was a couple of different reasons. One was that they wanted July 1st to do
Be
the
able to hire
hiring
the
as soon
person,
as
yeah.
the fiscal year started for them. The other reason, I think, was kind of a contingency. If something happens with Green Meadows or that money's drop off from Hamilton, that they'll want to have the officers still there, and they'll pay for it out of their budget. I think
Right.
that was a long-term
I understand
fail-safe, but
The question is, it's a Hamilton employee, why is it on their budget?
It's a Hamilton employee who will be utilized by the Hamilton Police Department during the year, during the months of the year when
Right,
the
so I
school
think
isn't
that's a-
open. So, I
that's a
mean, that's
conversation
another.
we need to have with Dr. Harvey and David Polito about figuring out to get it off of their budget, right?
That's what
If
we
we're
want to
gonna-
do. I
yeah.
mean, that's my position. I think we should bring that into our town.
Yeah, it shouldn't be on
but
their budget.
I don't think it should be on their budget.
I mean,
We
I
need
think-
to agree between us first and then have a discussion
And
with the
the good
schools.
news is we had an update from Pat, on the Patton property, and they're moving very quickly ahead, and within the next year. I mean, they're in their pre-operational year right now, so.
Right, and that's when we get the money, so we'll get the money this year
So we
for
get the money
it.
this
So
year.
the school shouldn't
Right.
have to cover that July 1st hire.
Right, so
Well,
we
you
need
said
to
we'll be
decide
getting that.
ourselves what we want to do.
We've already
and then
got the
approach
first payment,
schools.
and we expect, Bob Patton basically told us on Tuesday night that he expects us to get the rest of that in this next
Would
year.
it be the entire amount for the year? In other words, is it going to cover the
Yeah.
cost of the resource officer?
Yeah.
Cover the salary of the.
Cover the cost of the salary. and-
Cover the salary only of the resource officer.
No benefits?
No benefits.
And that's the other reason it
Did we
should be on
clarify
our
that? 'Cause I never
budget,
saw a
because the
response to that.
contingencies that make that
Right, because there's a lot of
close
variables.
to its full cost, even though it's not a
transparent.
fully loaded cost, are the savings we're expecting to get on summer overtime and also backfilling that position with a lot.
Right, there's a lot of
So those are
variables
all
there.
on our books anyway. That's why it makes sense to put the
No, I
whole
agree.
thing in our books.
I mean, yeah. I mean, what's-
And the other varying factor is, we haven't hired anybody yet, so we don't know where they are in
Right.
pay scale and experience, and then whether they're single, married, whether they're on a spouse's plan, whether they want a family plan, whether they want to, there's all
Right.
different variables with that
Right.
cost.
So do you want to take a vote that we say that it goes into the Hamilton budget now? So I make a motion that the resource officer position falls within the Hamilton police budget.
Second.
All those in favor from this side?
Aye.
Unanimous?
And I'll make the same motion for the finance committee. Somebody second?
Second.
All those in favor? All right, the 3-1.
So I have a question. and I don't know how much work it is, so please feel free to tell me how much work it is. But I see in our budget that we account for personnel expenses. And sometimes when I read it as a quick view, you read it as I want to know if we can break out our personnel expenses by regular costs and overtime costs. Because some of them, I think, they're increasing by greater than we increase the contracts, by a greater percentage, but maybe that's due to overtime. So I would love to see personnel expenses, what the regular budget is and what the overtime, but I don't know how much that is.
Does that also break down, I'll ask you, in that personnel, does that include wages and benefits?
No,
Just wages?
just wages. Benefits are all under the.
Unclassified?
Yes, unclassified health insurance, 916, I believe.
Okay, so just wages, all right, thank you.
And I have a question. I just looked at I'd love to see the compensation table prior to it going to town meeting, but the animal control position's up 90%.
Yeah, but
saw that.
that position hasn't had a raise, hasn't had a pay increase in 4 years of any kind. So it coincidentally, our IMA with the town of Manchester that splits that cost is up, and the way the expenses were being handled before doesn't follow best financial practices. So we're amending the IMA and updating it so that all of the cost lives here and we'll be getting reimbursed by Manchester on the other end. So there should be a corresponding revenue increase on the other side. So we agreed to provide a raise to the position, not a significant raise over last year in dollars amount, but you'll see that our costs went up because we're assuming all the costs this year and we'll be getting reimbursed, we'll be billing Manchester for the cost on the other end. That's a better financial practice. It's more clear and it's safer.
There's another reason.
There's another reason, okay. I was aware of those two reasons.
Just to go back to your first comment under personnel expenses, I should have brought this up. Part of the reason why you're seeing a higher increase is because for fiscal year 20, our budget is actually based on 52.4 weeks versus 52 weeks.
Okay.
So that's part of it. Just every year, this fiscal year 19 happened to be 52, fiscal year 20 happens to be 52.4 weeks.
Okay.
So that's one reason. The animal control, I actually changed the way we were budgeting for it. In the past, the only thing that was listed on the budget was Hamilton's share of the position. So every time you ran any year-to-date budget reports, you would see a deficit to the right saying that we spent more than we had in our budget. So I changed the way we budget. I actually included the total budget for that position in that line item. And because it's a Town of Hamilton employee and it's our payroll. And then I have a revenue coming from the Town of Manchester to offset that.
Okay.
So that's why you see, because in the past it was only Hamilton's share, and in this particular fiscal year, it's the total cost.
Gotcha.
Also, any stipends, in the past, they used to be paid from the Town of Manchester, and then we used to reimburse them. We're changing that with the new agreement. Any stipends that are paid to that position are going to go through our payroll. I think it's the proper way to do. And so we have everything in our budget. Again, it's going to all be paid through payroll, and then Manchester is going to reimburse us. So you will see in the revenue side, there's going to be the animal control IMA, and there's going to be a revenue portion there.
That makes sense, because I did see that, and I was wondering what it was all about, so it makes sense
Yeah.
now.
So I did change it.
That seems best practice to me. Cleans it up, makes it easier for
Yeah.
everybody to see. And
So
it's our employees, so.
Because someone actually looking at it would always say, well, we overspent. We didn't overspend. It's because that was only our share of the budget versus what the total agreement is,
No,
total
that's-
cost.
That's perfect. And the other departments that are over around the 2% increase, is that, say for like COA, is that step COA is up 4.9. Is that because it's step and COLA?
It's step and COLA, and it's also the 52.4 weeks, and also because of the grant match.
Was reduced?
Well, we actually use the same amount, but it's a lesser percentage compared to what her salary is.
So-
It could be more, we don't know. We never know what the grant amount is going to be, so normally what we do when we actually do the budget is we estimated that it would be the same as the prior year, and then if it's more, all it means is that we might have, I don't know, $1,000 left in that line item, if it does happen. But it's minimal. It's usually not, there's not much of a difference.
So isn't it usually best to have, I'd rather see that grant money go to an expense line and not use grant money for payroll.
Okay.
Just because I think whenever we're using grant money to hire our staff, if the grant goes away, it can skew things. I'd rather see all employees, and it puts their job in a way at jeopardy. I'd rather see all employees, and I don't know who else falls under this, is paid under our budget, and if we receive grant money, it's more of an expense line versus grant money going to pay for our personnel. Is there anyone else that we pay personnel?
There is, but sometimes it's the grant. Like, there's certain grants that can only be used for salaries.
Oh, okay, well, that's fair to know then.
Not to say that this particular one is, but I can think of one, actually, it's in the police department, that it is to pay for training wages, so that's what you have to use it for.
Okay. Well, and that again, though, it's training wages versus, you know what I mean?
Regular salary.
Regular salary.
Yeah. It depends on the grant specifications, really, but, you know, in some of the cases we could.
I did research on the COA one just because I was researching the newsletter for the COA asked me to research the newsletter costs, so I researched it, and it seems that most people use that grant money for their newsletter, and they don't use the COA money for a salary light item. That's what brought it to my attention. I'd also, for those of you who don't know, I'd like to propose a classification change in the town clerk's salary line. So we have an agreement with the town clerk that we negotiated last year for return to work in the offices. That is, to my knowledge, not been adhered to. So I would like to propose that the position go from an elected position to an appointed position, with the person currently in the role would finish then their term as elected. But next year, when that term is up, it would be an appointed position for the town. But that could affect salaries this year.
The only thing I have a problem with is when you go from an elected position to an appointed position, it tends to become politicized, and it kind of takes away from the voters.
It does take
in a democracy, you want to be able, the people should be able to vote in their elected officials, and once that's an elected position, I don't think it should be pushed back into a
and I understand your
position.
Viewpoint. Most towns, or a lot of towns, are all moving towards appointed positions, because as it stands today, if you have that role as an elected position, it's we're paying a full-time salary for that position, and that position, the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, no one has any say on the operation of that office, whether or not it's open, closed, what hours are worked, at all. So a number of towns have moved to an appointed position, so that everyone's working towards the same goal, that you have, it is a professional position in which we pay for a full-time position, should be a full-time position. By Mass General Law, you're only required to work 1 day.
Right, but I think history has shown that this past year, the offices have been opened, we've had,
The offices did not adhere to the agreement that was very clear and very simply made, that if you wanted to, if we did not move forward last year to make it an appointed position, that role would report their hours as any other employee in the town making that type of salary makes to the payroll department, which affects the morale of the entire town hall, and would only simply report hours out of the office. That was agreed to in writing, and that was never done. And the person does not want to report their hours as anybody else, that showing when they're in the office. That office, open or closed, is also reflective of a union employee you have in there, and not necessarily when the elected position is there.
I just have a real problem when you debase the democracy by letting the will of the people, you're taking away the ability of the will of the people to vote in their elected officials. I really have a problem with that.
We're putting it in front of them. I'm not deciding for them
Okay,
how it should
okay.
be.
Yep.
It would be a town meeting vote.
Right.
And the town,
Okay.
but town meeting should understand why we're doing what we're
They
doing.
should.
And then the residents are the ones who will decide
Right.
whether or not they think it's in the best interest of the town to be elected, or they think it's in the best interest of the town to be
Okay.
appointed.
Right.
I just have a little-
No, it's
can I
not
have
the
a little
board's
history?
decision
Right.
at all, so it's
I have a little history. Why is the position elected? Why wasn't it ever just an employee position?
A number of towns I think it all started as elected in almost all towns in the Mass, and then they've been slowly rolling them into appointed positions.
There's quite a few
because
towns that have it appointed
it's-
now.
does
You
it?
say is it appointed for a period of time, or is it?
So,
Yeah, it's
when I say
typically a
appointed,
year.
It's a hire.
it's a hire, like,
hire.
it would
The
be
hire.
like,
It's a hire.
it's a regular hire,
Yeah.
like Joe is, Marissa is.
Just a
It's a
hire.
professional staff
Yeah,
member.
that's what I.
Yeah.
That's what I would think.
It's a
I don't
hire,
know.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not for a period of time like an
Hire
election.
managed by
You
the
either,
government.
you could offer to give them a contract, or you could offer for
Right.
them to just become a town employee, and they'd follow all the normal
So,
rules and
Right.
regulations.
The reason I
of an
say it,
employee.
because it's, the term appointment sounds like it's
Okay.
got a
Right.
term on it.
No,
No,
it would
no, no,
either
it's
be an
just, they would
at-will
be
or
a
con-
regular
Right.
employee.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
All right,
They'd
so,
be an employee.
not to diminish your point at all, Allison, but just looking to move on here. I just had a question on the wage grid. I highlighted the kind of human resources director, assistant DPW director, and the kind of steps and what we're looking at. And then at the bottom of hourly positions, we have a matron. What are we looking for a matron for? I mean, not that the wages are that extravagant, but what was the reasoning behind it?
Yeah.
The matron.
Before you jump in, apologies, I have to, Hamilton Wenham girls basketball game.
Oh.
Assistant coach.
Enjoy.
Godspeed.
Go
I think
Generals.
Go Generals.
We need matron for a female, right?
I'm sorry? Oh, sorry.
It's right at the
I lost
bottom of the
my
hourly
train of thought.
positions in the green book.
Yeah, the reason why the human resources director and the assistant DPW positions are highlighted because those were the two new positions. So
Right.
you could see that
got it
those
right
were
there.
new. The matrons, the only reason they were highlighted, and I forgot to remove the highlighting.
Okay.
The only reason they're highlighted is because they're the only ones right now that are not actually on the wage grid.
Okay.
So you'll
Okay.
notice that everyone else has a grade next to them.
Mm-hmm. And there's no number next
There's
to them
no
yet.
grade next to the matrons. They
Sorry,
are
where are we?
We're kind
we're in
of
the,
right
um,
in
right
the
after
first page.
general
of
General fund expenditures.
And we're in
Yep.
the first page.
What is the position?
Police department?
Works
Yeah,
in the
police department.
So if you
Oh.
have a female
Perfect.
inmate,
Thank you very much.
female person that's under arrest, and they need services in the cell, that female has to attend to them. So they keep matrons for
All
the,
right, thank you.
Yeah, I
So
just
la-
didn't know why it was highlighted.
Yeah, so we've actually been trying the last couple of years to transition everyone into the new wage grid based on the study that was performed. And right now, I think they're the only ones that are still not in the part of the wage grid. Everyone else, you should see that they have a grade next to them. So,
All right, that clears that up for me. Any other questions over there on just general stuff? Do you have more to add, or can we dive into other stuff?
no,
Any other things
I have,
popping out at you?
Just a question.
ahead, Nick.
Are we going, Are you gonna go into the Patton homestead?
We can.
Quickly, what's going on there?
I offered the position.
One of the things we had done last year is we had identified that we were gonna hire someone by January so that they would start fundraising, and just, where is it, what's
Yeah.
happening?
I made an offer of employment to a Patton Homestead director this week. It was a couple weeks later than we wanted to, because initially our pool resulted in 2 finalists, one of whom withdrew and the other of whom, for various professional reasons on his end, we mutually decided that this wouldn't be a good fit at this time. He wants to stay involved and may eventually join the Patton Homestead Board. Very good candidate, very good guy. I hope he does get involved. But we wound up interviewing a couple of other candidates that were available, who became available after the first round of interviews, I should say. And I made the offer of employment to one of them on Thursday. She's got the offer letter. She's supposed to be sending it back to me, and I don't want to divulge the name in case something goes wrong. I'm keeping, I don't want to jinx myself. I'm very excited, assuming everything goes forward. Very excited. She currently manages educational and program development in part-time roles in 2 current museums nearby. They both spoke very highly of her. She has previous.
I wasn't going,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to go into that kind
Yeah.
of detail. I'm just trying to figure out how it impacts the budget.
So
for
she'll
this
be,
year.
we have a proposal to continue that salary through the whole year. There is a small transfer to the Patton Homestead for operational expenses.
That's the
but-
60,000?
Yeah, but
Almost
that'll
60,000.
handle her salary, and we're carrying over money that isn't going to be spent that was appropriate at the special town meeting. That'll get carried over into that fund as well. So our operating expenses will be able to be complete with an additional $60,000 appropriation, right? Or Marissa, is it 60 or is it 100?
What was it, 101, 491?
Rest is
101.
101.
101. 60.
Yeah, it's 101.
Right.
491.
He said 60. He confused me. I thought it was 101. Yeah, go ahead.
I see transfer from Patton Homestead is
Yes,
57,491.
In summary, if you look at that front page, you'll see that we have the direct revenues, and then we're saying that we're going to use $30,000 of unreserved fund balance, so funds that are going to carry from the prior year, and then the transfer from the general fund would be the 101. However, from that 101, there's going to be some money that it will be going back to the general fund. And the estimated is the 57 transfer to the general fund. You'll see it's the last line item under expenditures. And that would be for direct and indirect costs. So for example, all of our health insurance costs, life insurance, it's all paid out of the general fund. So if this particular employee takes health insurance, then we're going to reimburse the general fund for the health insurance. Our facilities director, it's been estimated that he spends about 8 hours a week at the Patton Homestead. So we're also allocating that 8 hours a week from his time to go back to the general fund. So that number could change because, again, if the person doesn't take health insurance, that's a big cost right there. So the general fund would be reimbursed for some of these costs depending on how things go.
And those indirect costs do include a portion of the time for Marissa overseeing the budget and for Tim overseeing the staff out there. So we're trying it to be as transparent as possible in representing what the costs of the.
You put all the money in and then pay out of it.
Pay out of it, so.
Gotcha. Rather than try and figure out where it's sitting, which is what the problem we had last couple of years. Okay, that makes sense.
And
Right way to do it.
actually, you have a second tab there, and it actually has the calculation of how those costs, or what it actually includes.
It's right behind that page.
Yeah.
See it now.
Marissa, when the town accepted the gift of the Patton Homestead, part of the condition of the gift was that we'd sell the property and get real estate revenue from those 4 acres, which we got. Can you put that $150,000 of revenue on this page somehow, so we know that that was part of the condition of what the town agreed to get into, and not, you talk about transfers back into the general fund or to cover other things, but there's there's no insight to the townspeople about how we originally accepted this gift and the total revenue picture that we have related to the acceptance of the gift.
I can't do it on this page. I mean, if you want to put some presentation to present at town meeting, that's part of it. This is actually, I can't put some revenue that does not belong into the fund to be presented as part of the budget. As you can see, actually, this doesn't even include, that's just the first thing that I should mention. This doesn't include the capital because I actually left that out of the picture altogether. This is just operating. Where the only transfer that we're asking from the general fund is for operating expenditures. So I didn't want to put the total there because if you put the total there, then people start looking at, oh, well, the fund has $300,000, but a lot of it was actually segregated or reserved for capital purposes. This is just operations. This is just, okay, what revenue does the fund take in? What revenue has the fund, or what balance has the fund accumulated to date? What are the expenditures that we project for the year? And again, some of them will change.
So if you can't put it on this particular page, how can you educate the electorate that accepted the gift to recognize that there's this $150,000 of revenue stream that we get related to the Patton Homestead?
Actually, to be honest with you, I don't think that's my job. My job is to put a budget together based on the revenues and expenditures related to this particular fund. I can't put real estate revenue into a fund that it doesn't belong there. Not to say that the Patton Ridge is not generating revenue. They are. They are, and we have, we've always had a footnote stating that they collect about $40,000 a quarter. But per Mass General Law, those funds go into the general fund.
Right, I think maybe to Scott's point is making it clear to the public that we're getting revenue, and I know what you're saying in the municipal finance world, but in the general public's eyes, I think maybe when PHI, if they do a budget presentation or something like that, or some way when we bring this to town meeting and someone's probably put a hold on it, I'm imagining that we have some kind of a pie chart or something saying here's the revenue we've gotten over the year from real estate tax from the Patton Ridge, and here's what we're expending, and here's the difference in the makeup.
And I think that's appropriate. I mean, I imagine that this 100,000 has to go through town meeting at some point to get.
Oh, it does. It has to be a town meeting vote.
In order to justify that, Corinne or whoever will need to present it, and she should, yeah, she could certainly.
And I think to Joe's point when we were talking about.
And I think Corinne has always actually brought that up at the town meeting presentation. She always puts. She always mentions that the amount of revenue that the Patton Ridge generates in real estate.
When you guys do your recommendations for town meeting, we're talking about the booklet that you guys are going to put out. I think that would be an important thing to include in there, would be that offset, since it's more of that narrative and explaining it to people what they're paying and what they're getting out of stuff.
Right.
So if I could too, at town meeting also, I would, prior to that, I think it's also incumbent on, the property is owned by the town. And so there needs to be some, explanation from the town, by me, of what we get out of having the property. In addition to getting the revenue out of Patton Ridge, we're moving the Hamilton Historical Society out there in February. So the building will be more utilized. We get revenue from the one museum that helps offset the expenses of operating the building. So we'll be putting together a presentation from the town, as to what we get out of that. The new Patton director will be working with other folks in town to bring new programming out there. It's not just about revenue generation. It's not just about developing the site to accommodate functions. It's about what can the people of Hamilton get out of having that facility owned by the town and operated by the town. The town's owned the property for a long time. I think there's an argument about whether or not it's been activated properly and utilized. So that's our goal this year, is to do those things. Yes, Alice?
I think that's wonderful that the Historical Society is going out there. I will say that that's the first time I've heard of it.
That's what?
Was right now.
That's what?
First time I heard that they were going out there was right now. I didn't know that that was the,
It's something we've been working on the facilities end for about, what do you say, Tim, about 4 to 6 weeks? Just trying to get it, the building able to accommodate them. We'll be letting everybody know when they move out. They've agreed to do a big open house and invite people out and let them see their new quarters. I think, you know, they're going out there for a number of different reasons, and to be honest, Allison, I made the decision to put them out there. Part of the reason part of the reason I made that decision is that currently we're paying a very high insurance premium on an unoccupied building because less than 50% of the building or less than 60% of the building is occupied. By moving them out there and by having the patent director out there this year, I intend to change that with Maya, and I've already had discussions with them about that. I need to get people in the building. I need to have it activated and utilized so that I can pay less insurance on it.
I think it's honestly fabulous that I think it's almost disrespectful the way we have our historical items downstairs in the mold. So I'm fully for it.
Well, I think it's disrespectful to ask volunteers to walk up and down those stairs into a
Yeah.
moldy, dank basement too to do volunteer work. I think it's unrealistic to expect people to access them as a resource in town, given where they're housed. And I think they have a lot of nice things in their collection down there that, quite frankly, nobody sees anymore.
Right. I agree.
We've worked with them to kind of give them the space they need, both for office space to be organized, but also to give them the space that they need to invite more participants, more volunteers, more visitors, have people come out and see their collection. It's a good way to showcase what they have. And I think this will be a positive thing both for the Historical Society and for the Patton Homestead. So that was the reason we made the decision. So
No,
I wanted to, as always, like I said, I don't want to tell you the name of the new director until she's actually, you know, signed the offer letter. So I don't like to announce things until I know they're going to happen. So
That makes total sense.
I'm sorry that I didn't mention before that we were moving Historical Society out there, but now that the space has been converted and they've agreed, we're just trying to get the building wired for computer and phone so that they can go out there.
They have the Historical Society out there plus this new director.
And the Wenham Museum.
And the Wenham Museum, that's
I'll probably
great.
have 80% of the first floor occupied. Now, that'll still only be about 60% of the building because the second floor has a lot of room, but I'll have about 80% of the usable
And the building would
first floor.
then be open to the public on a
Yeah.
fairly regular basis?
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. So, you know, the programming that we're talking about with the new director too doesn't, as I said, doesn't just involve fundraising or working with the PHI board on the long-term capital plan. It actually involves activating that site so that people feel that they can go out there and do things out there. She's got ideas about, you know, festivals and events and working with the Parks and Rec Department and working with the Hamilton Garden Club and crossing the Nordic Ski Club that's out there. They currently are using some space out in one of the sheds to store their equipment. When we had snow last week, they had a couple of trails open. I expect when we get snow again, they'll do the same. So we're trying to show people that there's value in having the Patton Homestead as a resource for the community, aside from being able to do veterans functions and weddings or whatever else we decide to do there, aside from having the Wenham Museum curate the Patton Archive collection there, there's value in that for the town. And that's what this director is going to be dedicated to.
Where is the Historic Society housed now?
In our basement.
Downstairs.
Oh, okay, that's right, yep, okay, moldy artifacts.
You know, one of the first times I came into town hall after I signed the contract, the door was open to the basement and it said Hamilton Historical Society and had an arrow downstairs. I'm like, you're kidding me. I was like, really? Okay. So, yeah, I just think it presents them with an opportunity to have a little bit better visibility. It's an easier place for people to come visit them. So, and they and the Wenham Museum can collaborate more because the Wenham Museum is actually very interested in helping them. They don't want to take it over. They're not trying to push the elbow their way in, but they know that the Hamilton Historical Society over the last couple of years has had a little bit of a challenge with membership. And so they you know, and talking about it with Kristen Noon, she said, you know, I want them to know we're a resource for them. We're willing to help and work with them too. So trying to create those connections.
Anything else patent-wise?
No, I think.
All right. I'm just looking in the general fund local receipts. I'm wondering if you can clarify a couple of things. I'm looking at in local receipts fees and the actuals over the last handful of years, and it's, you know, less than $1,000, et cetera. And then actual so far, we've got 10,000. We're estimating 20,000.
Fees.
Revenue.
and fees, right. So we got local receipts, motor vehicle excise, boat, et cetera, excise, pilot, and then, you know, there's some other fees and services, or charges and services, and then fees.
Yes.
And just wondering why there's such an increase in that.
It's actually the host community.
Ah, okay, that makes sense then.
It's
And
the
then
The host
rentals,
community agreement, previously it was only the sealer
host
fee that
community.
was part of that category. And now, we got the first $10,000, that's a $10,000 you're seeing based on the
Gotcha.
agreement, so.
and then where does, when we had the agreement with Gordon, and now it's the Wenham Museum for the rental of the Patton archives?
shows up in the
and stuff,
Patton
does that
budget.
show up in the
That
Patton?
actually got moved to the Patton.
Okay. And then the other one that I was looking at in the local receipts forecast was on the, just past the green page here, on the page I was at, where it's Selectmen rental income. And we're in a deficit, and then we're at 18,000. What was that one? Do you see where I'm looking at here?
That does not meet deficit, sorry, that's actually, it's a positive, sorry.
It's a positive.
Revenues are credits, they're,
Okay, yeah,
sorry,
that-
it's a system generated. That's the rental for the gun club,
Oh, yeah.
and,
Liquor licenses or something too, right? Wasn't
I'm sorry?
It was vice taxes, guns and liquor and,
No, the liquor license are under licenses, but the
Okay.
rental income is the gun club.
Gun club.
And,
Okay.
The rent at the police department for the
Oh,
ambulance.
for the ambulance for
Yes.
Bullport,
I
and,
believe it's $500 or $600
month.
a month,
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yep.
I remember talking to the chief about that.
What line is it?
under rental.
Public
income.
safety building?
I thought our payment in lieu of taxes was 35,000 from one entity. Thank you, Tim.
Take care. Thanks, sir. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
No. Okay.
35,000, are you thinking of the Gordon Conwell at one point in time? That's not a pilot, we don't have an agreement, that's actually a gift to the town.
Yeah, that's a gift.
Ah, okay,
We
so it
kinda
doesn't
call
show
it a
up.
pilot, but it's not an official
The
pilot.
32 is from DEP? Oh, DCR?
It's for the Manchester Pump Station
Oh, okay.
and the Housing Authority.
Oh, okay.
Those are the two pilots that we have.
So the housing authority should go up. So the housing authority was underpaying us. They were paying us like $2,000 a year, and it should have been $8,000 a year. I brought it to Tina. Tina
Right.
agreed, send it to housing. So how's the number?
And there was a revision because it was incorrect based on the pilot agreement.
So it was by the number of bedrooms.
I'd have to look back, but there was a revision to that.
Okay. Do we have a listing of all of their, I can't seem to find a listing of all the addresses and apartments for the housing.
I'd have to check with Tina.
That wouldn't be you, so that's fine. I reached out to Tina.
We're gonna have to put a curb on your reserve spending. It's up 778%.
is it really? Did we buy something last year?
132 here. Income reserve expenses, it's just $3,000. And you spent $100
I wonder
in
where
the
that
last-
went.
Oh, I can explain that, actually. There are two things that
There's a
are-
couple of things that you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's still a small dollar amount, but the
Right.
increase
Jumps there.
jumps at you when you're just
Just,
looking at
a
the
couple
percentage
of-
and change.
Couple of new items that are included are the Finance Committee Book of Recommendations. That's the increase, the $3,000.
That'd be for the
Um,
printing and
Right.
distribution.
We gotta figure out how we're gonna pay it this year, but next year we'll have it in the budget.
And then you'll also see an increase under the planning department.
Yeah.
And that's for the historical commission. They actually want to hire a consultant to do development of guidelines, and they're asking for $15,000.
After the first.
Historical Commission?
Historic District Commission.
Yeah, the historical.
$15,000 for what?
To-
To develop guidelines for building within the Historic District Commission.
Oh,
Design
okay,
guidelines.
now I get you, okay.
So they currently don't have that, and it'd be helpful for them to have that so that they can tie their decisions to something.
Do we know, do we get a lot of,
Changes in that district?
yeah. I thought it,
Yes, no? Not a lot, really.
I wouldn't,
A couple a year.
yeah, I don't know. I really couldn't qualify that, I'm just,
Do they,
Curious.
To the committee, so we passed it through. It's
yeah. Do they plan on, I mean, have they put an RFP out for a consultant yet?
They requested quotes.
Okay.
Anybody have an idea how many properties are in the?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'd like to maybe see something from them to kind of explain why they think they need it, and I'm all for it if we need it, but.
because I'm thinking too, a lot of the guidelines, like, we could just look at other towns
Right.
and adopt theirs
Right, do we need to get a,
We just-
versus a consultant.
We also just passed a ginormous bylaw about.
the demolition bylaw?
Yeah, the demo delay bylaw. that
Takes a
affects
year
that.
for just to get a demo.
So, which has a lot of procedure in it,
Yeah,
so.
I'm a little hesitant on that one until I hear more about it, I guess.
Yeah,
Feels a little weighty.
And I think when we had our planning board thinking about revising the zoning bylaws, I think we had them do a pitch at town meeting for it. I'm wondering if HDC will do something similar, or at least bring it to the Board of Selectmen in the FinCom to review.
okay.
Would you like me to go quickly through, I think that's the sheet that you're looking at, and just tell you what the major increases are?
Yeah, that'd be
it'd be
great.
fabulous.
So the first big increase that you see there is the town manager, and that's the HR position, that it's to be shared with 2 other communities, so you would see a revenue offset as well.
Where would you see that revenue offset? I didn't see it in there. I don't see where it would be.
It's actually, if you go back to the revenues tab, under other charges for services, there's a section for other charges for services, there's human resources.
Is that the 101, 103 number you're talking about right there? And I'm looking at, oh, maybe I'm looking at the wrong page. I was looking at operating expenses instead of revenue.
Yeah, if you go into the general fund revenue tab, there's, first there's a summary, but then there's another section. The first page, there's other charges for services, in which we have all, our joint programs revenue.
It's about halfway down the page, it's in
Yeah.
bold.
It's,
Yeah.
it's labeled as human resources.
You see that it's a increase of about $90,000 over the year before. In there.
Okay. So that's the 90,000.
Now you're in the-
Just in general, is that I'm looking at the revenue estimates for 19 at $1.8 million and $1.9 million for 20. Is that the only change, is that amount?
We
Everything.
don't have any new revenue
Oh,
sources.
no new revenue, that's the only increase, okay.
We're not gonna do anything, are we doing anything for Airbnb, which could be a revenue source?
That's a good conversation for whether the Board of Selectmen wants to put that on the warrant and have the town meeting
Okay.
make a vote. If you do that, then that could change our revenue projection. But I mean, by the time we get it.
Probably
in,
not a lot, though,
Probably
either.
not a lot in the first year.
Anything from Amoresco? as far as time frame for that? I know that will be a little bit of revenue, but
I will check with them. I haven't heard anything in a while.
it's been kind of radio silence on that.
What's Amoresco? What is Amoresco?
The solar at the
Solar
landfill.
panels.
Oh, yeah.
I heard too, the tax is change, how you can
There's-
tax solar panels
Yeah,
is
there is a new
changing.
thing I just read. I can't remember all the
It's gonna
details of it.
reduce
I
our
had Donna,
revenue.
I should have forwarded it out to you. I did have Donna check on that, and she didn't think that the way our agreement with them is set up is, it shouldn't be that much impacted, but I'll get the answer for you in writing and, send it out.
Thanks.
So going back to expenditures, the next big line item is actually under Finance IT Department, under operating expenditures. And that's actually over $30,000 of that number is for the Vision upgrade. So Vision is the software that the assessor's office uses, and they have to do an upgrade, and that upgrade is over $30,000.
A lot of money.
It's a lot of money for an upgrade. That's what I said as well. And then there's also an estimate there for the OPEB actuarial report. We have to do an actuarial study every 2 years. So in 19, we didn't have to do it. In 20, we have to do it. So that's the other portion of the increase there.
So, question,
Yes.
again, back to the efficiencies, I'd love to, wouldn't love to see an increase, but love to see an increase so that we have a better mail system for our employees and for all of our boards to get away from NII.net, because I think the efficiency would outweigh the cost.
So I was just gonna actually tell you that I heard from Andy Wood last night. I had been asking him to provide me a quote. I don't still have quotes,
Yeah.
but I do have bad news.
Yeah.
The company that provides our mail service, our email service now, is going out of business. They'll be closing down in March.
Oh, so that's
In March.
probably why it all died the other day.
Yeah, so he's,
Good timing.
Yeah.
so.
Or bad timing,
He's,
depending.
I've already had him looking at either Office 365 or Google as options, and
Yeah.
they're gonna be a little bit more money, so I told him to get me those prices a month ago. After yesterday's news, I expect that I'll get those prices a little quicker.
Right.
There will be an increase, because we're only paying a couple $1,000s a year right now for the existing service, and that's probably part of the reason it's so poor.
Yeah.
But we're gonna have to migrate, so there may, Phil, I'm telegraphing to you that there may be a need to request a reserves
You're
fund
gonna come out of
transfer
FinCom reserve for that?
for this year to get it off the ground, and then we'll have to adjust the number in the budget for whatever the increase is gonna be going forward. But I just found that out yesterday after town hall closed, so I hadn't had a chance to even talk about it with Marissa yet.
So could we bump our budget, could we get a number could we build it into our budget? Maybe once we get a little bit better of a number, as opposed to doing a reserve fund
Well, yeah, no,
transfer.
Add
my
the
goal was
2,000
to
or
have,
whatever into
my
it.
goal always was to have Andy get me a number, and then make a budget adjustment before we got to town meeting, but I don't have a number to make the adjustment on, and I didn't just wanna.
No,
take it.
But we
I
do have
get
an
that.
emergency in
We don't-
FY
we need to
'19 to
do it
worry
in
about.
FY
But we
With
need
the
to do
company
it
going out
now,
of business,
because
that's
we-
the purpose
we
of
won't have
using the
email,
reserve
right.
fund.
So
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
so
Either
that's the
way,
only
we'll still
reason
need to
I'm only
bridge the
looking to get us through the
gap.
end of the year, but unfortunately, it may be the cost of transition too involved in this year, which, because of the
Sure.
emergency.
Yeah,
Right.
no, understood.
Because we won't be able to plan it as well, so that may affect the price, so I don't know
So
what it is
the-
yet, so.
The state has a number of contracts for,
There's probably somebody on the
firms.
state bid list, right? I would
yeah,
assume.
for firms to evaluate what you should go with, or for actually going with it. If Andy gives me a head count, I'd be happy to quote it all out for him. I do it all the time.
We have about 200 or 225 email
Users.
addresses, users right now. So
But I mean,
I'd want a system that has a little bit of room to grow. You know,
Right.
We're gonna add a patent homestead, do you wanna have a little bit of room? So if we could price a system at around 250 users, that would probably be sufficient.
yeah, I can do it so easily through the state and other, resources, because I know, all due respect to Andy, I've been asking him to give me a quote for years, and we haven't gotten a quote. So I'd be happy to expedite getting a quote now that it's going out of business.
I hope to, at one of the next 2 meetings, have a proposal for you and a reserve fund transfer being prepared for them, because we're gonna have to move quick.
Yeah.
All right, I'll do that.
All right, other things, Marissa, that jumped out?
We mentioned the planning board, the $15,000 for the Historical District Commission. Police department, you'll see an increase there. It's related to a retirement that we're gonna have in that department, so we're gonna have a payout for a second vacation time. Under the fire department, there's an increase there. That's actually the lease payment on the fire truck that was purchased.
That's the 98% for the operating?
Yes, yep. So that's, the lease payment is about $66,000. Inspectional services, the assessment, it's estimated that it will go up 19,000, so that's the new joint program that we have with Wyndham for inspectional services.
For the lease payment,
Yeah.
I think it's helpful too for people to know that we do lease to buy.
Right.
It's not, some people view lease, they think of your car lease, so you're paying
Oh,
$66,000.
no.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Or
no.
Yeah, I
lease
think
to
it's
buy.
It's a
worth
lease
explaining how a
purchase, yes.
municipal lease works.
Yes, it's different.
totally different than a regular car lease
Yeah.
program.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We own it at the end. Animal control, I explained, I did change the way that
Right.
that's being budgeted. Public Works is the assistant position. Waste, it's related to our contract with Casella and the recycling costs increase.
And we had about $1,200 in revenue receipts for stickers and stuff like that, I think, that offset just a little bit. If I'm-
Oh, the sticker
over the
revenue,
DP
yeah, it's pretty
The trash
small.
pickup, it's pretty small.
Yeah, I wanna say it was $1,300 or so.
Is there somewhere in here, and maybe I just didn't see it when I was looking through it, for our blue bags fees? Are we up or down on that? I know we're probably down on it, but from previous to our weekly pickup.
Sticker review? Oh,
Yeah,
it was the- oh,
yeah,
it was
there's
1,500,
the
yeah.
other one, the blue bags, the usage
Oh.
was about, we're at about $10,000 in revenue.
And were we at about 30? We were up.
I'd have to look
Be
back because
previous to the-
previously it was in the waste enterprise.
That's right. It was
So this is,
commingled with other
18 was the
stuff.
first year that we
It was
have it.
separate.
So in 18, it was about $13,000. So it looks like we're up a little bit because we're around 9,900 for this year. And last year, the total was 13,000.
Right, so we're,
So we're a little up there. But the sticker revenue, it's $1,300.
The idea of creating that was a subject of debate for many years, other FinComs too, the idea of trying to offset some of the heavier weight things and, or the cost of the heavier things. So $1,300 doesn't really do much of as an offset.
Yeah.
Is that a?
right. And I'm thinking tipping fees on all that stuff, and you're throwing out a couch and you're collecting $15 for it when you might be adding $15 as the tipping fee. Who knows?
Maybe if Tim gets some help, he can look into, there's some recycling programs for mattresses. Would work different from the other, but for some of the heavier items, the state has programs that again, just might take those large textiles out of our
Right.
trash stream and weight.
The next one would be the library assessment. I haven't actually got the exact number yet from Wyndham, but I spoke to their finance director and she told me to estimate about the 6% increase. So that's about 45.5.
Was there any reasoning why 6%? They just said 6% was what they had thought.
She didn't have the calculations ready to send at that point in time. She told me that that was the number that they were looking at. So to use that for our estimate.
This is a benchmark, okay.
But we usually have a joint meeting on the joint programs beginning of February. So the salary reserve, as you know, we have contracts that are gonna be upped, so.
Right.
And
3 contracts?
3.
And retirement,
Did
health
we,
insurance, all of those are things that we have no control over.
Can I just mention on the 3 contracts? I've heard that the 3 contracts that are up are already bringing the teachers' increases to the town as a comparison to where they feel their.
Well,
Would be.
I've had one meeting with the admin union so far. It was just a meet and greet and get to know, and they did mention the teacher's contract.
why would you not?
No, I don't disagree. I'm just saying, we
yeah, no,
thought it
it's
would have an
affecting,
impact,
right,
and
right.
it's gonna have.
And we knew it would when we
Yeah.
had the whole conversation with the school district.
And I've got a letter from the police union wanting to open negotiations, and I'm waiting on a letter from the fire, so.
They wanna open them?
Yeah, you initiate the process by sending a letter to the administration. Our contract's running out, we'd like to open.
No, that's fine. I thought you meant we just finished this and they
No,
wanna
no,
reopen them.
those are the 3 unions that are due to
Perfect.
negotiate this year, so. They're
Thank
just
you.
asking for us to start meeting.
On celebrations, Marissa, is that like community house stuff with 4th of July and the Legion, is all that in the
It's mostly,
celebrations?
it's the Memorial
Memorial Day Parade. and the-
Memorial Day Parade
And-
and the 4th of July.
We had talked back and forth, the last kind of go around when we had their last celebration, we were over what we thought. Did we get anything from the Legion as far as budget thoughts from
I
Greg or
didn't get
anybody?
anything. I know that Robin had sent out a memo, asking them to provide us detailed information as what what they were expecting to spend. I pretty much estimated based on last year's
Okay.
actuals.
So Joe, just to fill you in.
Taking a note right now.
Yeah. If you could reach out to Greg McKenna.
McKenna.
He and I and Marissa had kind of gone back and forth on a couple different things as far as the spending for the celebrations, and then we had flags where we were getting some reimbursement, but we had to do out of pocket first, and then
Yes.
the state program was gonna pay us some date. I don't know if we've gotten that yet, because I know it takes a
No.
long time to do.
Yeah, it takes a while.
So we're trying to, and my conversation with Greg was trying to future cast those needs and let Marissa know ahead of time so we can budget for it and have it be a known thing instead of a kind of a,
Yep.
oh no, we just spent all this money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at this
So-
point,
Bless
we've
you.
forecasted, but we'll get a better number from him and
Yeah.
try to adjust it before, try to adjust it in the budget before we move it to town meeting.
Perfect.
Yeah, and then, like I said, all the other ones are things we have no control, the
Right, the
retirement, health
unemployment.
insurance,
Insurance, yeah.
property and casualty insurance, as well as workers' comp.
What's the transfer to special revenue? What's that one?
That-
992.
That's actually the Patton Homestead transfer.
Oh, okay.
What is transfer to agency?
It's the HDC.
What?
HDC, the
The
Hamilton.
meals tax.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah,
meals
yeah, yeah,
tax.
yeah, okay.
Hamilton Development Corp.
And so I noticed
You're
that.
used to seeing the $65,000.
Right. Was there 68 somewhere on here that I saw?
I estimated the revenue to be at 68 for fiscal year 20.
Okay.
Yes. So, I did some research on this one because the number had never changed.
It never changed, right?
65, 65, 65.
Where does the excess or less
General
go?
fund.
So
Or
then
come
I
from?
had to pull the votes from when this was actually adopted. And this, I think that in the past, whether it's correct or not, we've always transferred the amount that had been budgeted,
Right,
but that's not what we've collected.
right.
So for this year, and I have the votes if you'd like to see it, I actually pulled them. This year, that is the actual revenue that we collected in 18.
Okay. And so, in the past, when we've had the 65,000 and say we've done 68 or 70,000, where does that,
Stayed in the general fund.
And probably fell to free cash because we didn't
It
have it
did.
allocated anywhere else.
okay.
But it could have gone either direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Initially,
We'd have to look back to be sure. if there were years where we appropriated 65 and we didn't even get to that number, but.
I'm trying to think, I was there, but I can't remember the original intention. If it was meant to be 65 indefinitely, and then the rest go to, like you
It
said,
didn't
general
have a
fund, it
number
didn't have any.
associated, no.
It
I
didn't.
actually have a copy of the,
Because I just know from the start, we've done 65,000 has been the number. And I don't remember why we came to that conclusion, if that was the original estimate, and
there were two articles. One was the meals tax, and it was just to adopt it.
right?
And then the second article
Was a
was
transfer
a
to the
meals
HDC.
tax stabilization fund, which I was somewhat questioning this. I was gonna check with Don on it, because it says that it was a meals tax stabilization fund, you know, and we didn't create a meals tax stabilization fund.
No.
We're giving it to HDC.
Right.
And it just says that the town establish a commercial economic development stabilization fund pursuant to MGL 40, Section 5B, for the purpose of supporting economic development in the downtown commercially zoned district.
Right.
So there was no dollar amount, it was simply that the meals tax revenue would go to this fund. Initially, I thought that it was, whatever was budgeted
Right, was that amount.
was that amount to be transferred, because if you look back,
It's the same, yeah, 60
it's $65,000 every single year.
cents a start, yeah.
And that was what was being budgeted for, or estimated.
Right.
But that's not really what the article says.
Is there anything we need to do to clean that up?
I can check with Don, I don't know what we could do at this point in time, because years have closed and it
Right.
rolled back to free cash. But I think that, you know, starting this year, what I would do.
I was gonna say, moving
is
forward, I'm not
actually
worried about the-
move what we received in the prior year, not in the prior year, the prior two fiscal years, because in fiscal year 19, I don't know what we're gonna collect in order
Right.
to have that number. But
Right.
if we look at fiscal year 18 and see, okay, this is what we've collected, and transfer that amount.
That makes sense to me. Anybody else?
So we'll have to, so that's an annual vote at town meeting.
Annual
anyway,
vote at
so
town
we'll make that clear at the town meeting vote.
Yeah. All right.
So I have a question that's out of order, but I think you may be looking at the structure of the finance departments. Do you foresee any changes into the budget relative to that?
Not not projecting anything yet. I think that the idea of I did hire a consultant to interview the finance team and look at our operations and project forward how that looks going forward. And I've got a draft of the report. And, you know, I'm going to have a conversation with him next Wednesday before we get the final report. And it'll provide us with a couple of different things that we can do to improve efficiency. He is not recommending any decrease in staff, if that's what you mean, but he's also not recommending
I would not expect any decrease.
and he's not necessarily recommending any increase in staff, but he may, you know, he has kind of looked at the operation and are there things that we could be doing differently that would achieve some better
Some efficiencies to balance
And
things
so,
out.
without going into great detail about a draft at this point, I think that there are some things that I would like to change operationally, and when the time comes, which means after I've met with Marissa and her department, her sub-department heads, and we kind of develop a plan based on the recommendations in the report, we'll bring those forward before we do them. But I don't expect it to cause a significant change in the budget one way or the other.
That's fine. May I possibly see a draft?
I don't have one.
I can get you a draft. I'd prefer to get it. I'm a big version control guy. You know, if something is in the draft and doesn't show up in the final report, people go, "Why?" I'd rather
And I'm fine with that. I just think.
wait and show you the final report, and that will be made public as well. It's a public document.
I'd like to review the recommendations before they're made public. I'd like to see what he's.
Sure.
That's all.
Could I ask why? Just curious.
I actually worked here for a number of years.
I'm aware of that.
So I think I have some unique insight into the departments that might be helpful, and it does not mean that you have to, you should, I'd like to take them into consideration. You do not have to implement them. It does not have to be your plan. But I would like to see what's coming forth as a result of it. I do not at all, I'm not suggesting at all any decrease, so no one gets frightened anywhere. That's not what I'm saying. But I would like to see, I think where the fallout is within that area is roles and responsibilities.
That's exactly the reason I asked for the study in the first place.
And so I'd like to see what they recommend of roles and responsibilities. I'd like to have some input that you don't have to pay any attention to, but.
I'll be happy to have input.
If that's fair,
That's
okay?
Anything else from the general? Dropping like flies here.
We've been through this, yeah.
Yeah. Capital budget stuff, any major stuff that we want to discuss today?
No, I mean, I know the number in the budget proposal looks a little large, and I think we explained why we plan to do some stuff this year on bands, and if it gets approved, to do it on bands and figure the debt service later. But as large as the number looks, we have a lot of larger needs that are coming down the road, and I really, what's in front of you is kind of the things that I think are important to do or important to start to address this year. The vehicles are part of the regular programming of replacement of vehicles and
Right.
police and public works. And there are a lot of other things in the capital improvement plan that we pushed off. And there's a lot of other things in the capital improvement plan that just are currently planned to go in other years. But that's why, we've started talking to the Board of Selectmen about a new capital improvements committee or resuscitating the old capital management committee, whatever form it takes. We need to start looking at all of our capital needs holistically.
We had a 5-year plan.
We have a 5-year plan of replacement of things, but we don't have a 5-year projection on how to pay for those things either. And I envision a
Right.
capital improvement plan doing it both those things.
We didn't know
Right.
what would be bonded and what we
Right.
wanted
So-
to do, so.
So the idea would be to have a capital improvement committee working with us and the department heads to assess the needs, make sure that they're in the right priority, right year on the list, and also assess what those costs are going to be and project out how we pay for them so that we're not kind of surprised by it every year.
Right.
The voting machines, are they at the end of their useful life? Or
Yes.
we got to update, stuff like that?
Yeah.
Way
I
past.
talked to Andrew about that. I knew we had a lot to replace, and they're pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So this number is actually lower than I thought it was.
Yeah, it's pretty, they're gonna, I believe they give us a little bit back, not a lot, but they give us a little bit back on buying back their old machines. Phil came in for was it you?
Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
the
he came
demo
in for
of
the
the new
demo with the dealer would be selling us the machines, and it's a much more efficient system too. The current machines have a lot of kind of technical, mechanical flaws that create work for the staff, for both the poll workers and the town clerk when it comes to counting ballots. The new machine is designed in a way that they've had a lot more success in reducing those problems. And like you said, I think that they usually anticipate the machines lasting 10 to 15 years. I think we're at 18.
Yeah.
So we're beyond the end of the useful life, the prescribed useful life, and it's time to look
The
at
day
it.
after the last election, one of the poll workers came in to have coffee in the morning and said, "You gotta buy new machines. We were there past midnight
Yeah,
last
they were
night.
there
This
pretty
is
late."
just bad," so,
They had to keep redoing stuff, I
yeah,
know.
they were jamming.
Yeah.
So, do we have any capital plan built in as of yet? And I know you probably don't because it's new, but looked at our hydrants, and our hydrants are quite aged, and they have a life expectancy not beyond 40 years. And we have 57 that are 38 years or older, and 142 of unknown age,
So
which I
think-
assume are very old.
So we're gonna have a meeting, Tim Olson, Ray Burnett, myself, and the water distribution foreman are gonna be meeting this week to go over the hydrant issue,
Okay.
to prioritize them, and certainly there are some things that we need to try to address immediately in this current fiscal year, and I've told Tim he's going to have to try to figure out how to work it in his budget. Once we have that kind of plan of attack with them, and we'll be able to project out a little bit, and we may have to make a moderation. The budget proposal is the start of the process, not the end of it. So if we have to make an adjustment based on that information, we will. My goal is to keep as much of that into the operational budget. This should be something we're doing every year. This isn't a cap. Yes, they last 50 years, but they don't cost a lot of money comparatively to other capital. Hydrants, a hydrant replacement should cost us around $15,000 or $17,000. If we're doing a couple every year like we should, that shouldn't be an issue for a capital plan. It should be part of the operational budget. And we've gotten away from it in the past in the town. This is not to blame Tim or Jeff or anybody else. Past practice, going back years,
I agree,
has ignored those hydrants.
I
so
agree.
We're going to try to address it now going forward.
Is that because there was no assistant?
That is.
It probably is.
Exactly. So we're going to try to
think
address it now
that's a-
going forward, and my goal is to try to get the immediate ones cleaned up.
Yeah.
And then have a plan going forward to try to keep it within the
And
operational budget.
there's
of
some
the water
issues with
department.
some of the hydrants along Bay Road. There's going to be a major undertaking because of the way they're laid out.
Yeah, and he said that
You got to stop traffic and you got to go
$15,000
around.
a year.
Yeah, it's a lot.
This is what I do see as an efficiency that the assistant could provide.
Absolutely.
It is tracking and reporting this type of information, so those building the budgets and understanding but everyone knows what's happening and then bases its decisions on that. You have 109, once you fix the 57 and forget about the unknown age of 142, you have 109, 20 to 30. So we need to be working on this. But I agree with you. It's just, now that we know about it, let's just move it forward and start working on them.
Is there, I know we had the stormwater management plan and our road assessment just fairly recently. Is all that baked into Tim's forecast?
Yes,
Okay.
that's baked into Tim's annual operating. He plans for that stuff in the operating budget.
And then I see Chapter 90, we've got $100,000 for road and sidewalk repair program. And then, was there more into Chapter 90 that I know we get about 220, 230 a year in Chapter 90 funding. Do we spend close to that every year, or do we have I think we have
accumulated
we
funds.
accumulated
We have
a
some
million
accumulated funds, right.
something now?
About $1 million. I know that there's a pavement project currently going on that is being paid out of Chapter 90.
And
I don't
Tim,
think we have any big ones,
well,
so.
Tim was planning to try to maintain the cost of the Tobacco Road paving
With
within
the
that,
Chapter
with
90,
as
I
much as
remember that was-
possible within that. So,
Okay.
Overall,
There's thought going into that.
his thought going into that, to try to keep that from hitting the capital.
Okay.
I know these are more on the capital ones, trying to project some of the larger projects, like Tobacco Road paving, the water infrastructure, possible connection with Manchester, or whatever we can do to secure our water supply, and also town hall capital construction. And not to be too specific, some of those are mentioned as bonding in here, which would imply a town meeting decision, a specific town meeting decision about that. But if there's Chapter 90 money for the Tobacco Road paving, that would not be
So we don't
considered
have-
in the
we
same
don't have-
capital
We don't have the
bucket?
total cost on what that's gonna cost yet, right? So the paving itself might only cost $700,000, but to reset the way, to move the road back into our right-of-way, taking down some trees, whatever those costs, there's gonna be an additional cost there. So I think that Tim's overall thought is that the project might be, and it's not a big stretch of road, so you would
Multiple
think.
layers, multiple funding sources, kind of a
And
thing.
it's gonna be more than $1 million, so let's, $1 million
What can we
five, so.
do for you, Joe, to help kind of keep that at the forefront of your planning efforts or public awareness so that those big projects are known and moving forward?
Well, the Capital Improvement Committee, I think, establishing a committee and putting them on task for it and having them work with us, working with me, and getting the note and the news out there about what's coming down the road, forecasting how we're going to spend it, but also building support for the projects that need to get done. Tobacco Road in particular, I've asked an engineer to take another look at the now 6-year-old cost estimate and add in the cost of doing the water. When I have that price, we'll be able to start to try to sell that project. But again, I don't have a final price on it. So.
I was kind of thinking of, I'll maybe make it a request, not a suggestion, but I think that informing the citizens broadly about what these big projects are and what they might be coming and why we need to do them. And maybe in the FinCom
I was just going to say
advice
that in the FinCom
thing
packet.
that you do, there might be a good way to help communicate, because that's going to be one thing that goes to everybody, gets mailed out to everyone.
I would say we put our 5-year capital forecast / plan in
I would really like
in
to
that
see
budget
that.
book
Yeah, I'd like
that
to
you
see
guys
that
send out, or your
5-year
recommendation book.
capital plan, yeah.
As I
And
think that
also
would be
support
good.
the stabilization fund, the capital
Yeah.
stabilization
Yeah,
fund.
absolutely.
Right.
And it can
It
talk
all
about-
will all tie together. And I think to Scott's point, and how can we help Joe and facilitate this and the ask for the capital improvement plan committee, that us as a board of selectmen, I would sure would have to form the committee, right? So we'll talk about that at upcoming agenda, and then maybe in your booklet, you can even solicit, hey, we're looking for some people to help us
Yeah,
out with
absolutely.
this. You know, since it's going out to everybody in town, why not put the ask out there?
And we want schools involved, and we
Right.
want maybe some of the community involved. I mean, we wanted to look at
Right, maybe if we can
Total
get a kind of a
idea,
recommended,
right?
you know, if we could have somebody from the school, if we could have somebody from here and there, and we put that recommendation out in your booklet,
Yeah.
and then ask for people to volunteer.
Sure.
I have also, I've also indicated to Peter Lombardi and Wenham that we'd like them to participate in a kind of a regional approach. So, you know, there's a lot of moving parts for a town like ours, right? The regional school district is a layer, but even what happens with the regional school district has to be decided in 2 different towns. So Peter sees the reason behind having their capital improvement plan function happen alongside ours, so that we are informed of each other's kind of challenges in front of us. So
This is a way off the topic, but where's the Wenham's water system? What do they use?
Salem and, it's something to do with Salem and the Wenham Pond, that's their, I believe.
I'm not
I don't
sure.
think they're you know what, actually, I'm sorry.
They have
I think they're Ipswich River too.
they have some Ipswich
They're in the
River.
Ipswich
Because I
way.
know they use part of our permit or something, so they have to be.
They had their own permit and they gave it up this year. They walked away from their permit this year. They have, I believe they have some limited registered use. I think they have some use in another basin, and they gave up their permitted use this year.
I understand coordination, but anyway, something went off in my head. Thank you for answering.
Anything else from anybody? I know FinCom has kind of gone over it piece by piece, but anything from Allison or Scott?
Are you now talking kind of overall here, or?
Whatever you
on-
want, either we can dive in a little
I
bit more.
I
of
have 2
generalities.
questions, really FinCom-related questions, because you spent months diving into detail here. Is your overall view of the budget? I know you probably haven't taken a vote on whether you think it's all appropriate or not, but so far, this is our first view of it. What do you think? It's appropriate?
Anybody want to comment?
I'm concerned about the large increase. The bulk of it seems to be labor. There's some discussion about, there's some reasons why the labor, what do you call it, the assistant in the DPW makes some sense. But every time you do that, you're creating that jump in level of expense. But it's just overall, it seems high, but I don't know where to take it down.
So are you all then done with your reviews now, or you're going to pass some advice
We
to
haven't
us
had a
about these
chance to
things to
discuss
the
this.
select board?
Yeah, we've gotten a good review from Marissa on what's in there, sort of talked through issues with her, just like you did at this meeting. We have not had a chance to go through ourselves and have that discussion yet on where we are with it, so. Obviously, again, we've got a big issue with the schools. They're 2/3 of our budget, 60% of our budget. And their increase is actually less than ours this year. So it's an interesting dynamic that we're seeing. My biggest concern right now at the schools is their capital plan, because that's not formalized at all, really. As Michael said when he came to your meeting, it's a placeholder. By the way, to follow up though, as I asked him to meet with myself and John Pruitt one-on-one, so that we could look at some of the details in their budget. John and I did do that. We spent an hour and a half with him and Jeff going through the details of their budget, and I'm pretty comfortable with their operating plan. And I'm also pretty comfortable with your operating plan. I think this is a good budget. Now, yeah, the totals are high, they are what they are. There's nothing in here that I could put my finger on and say, I'm
That's a problem.
opposed to doing this or spending this money on it. So,
Yeah.
if that answers your question.
Well,
where
I'm also trying to figure out calendar and timing, because sooner or later, we've got to put this, selectmen got to put this in front of the town, and we got to start voting on things, it's got to get in the warrant, all those good things. So I'm just thinking of the timing, if you were trying to get a sense of what advice you might be wanting to give to us and when that's going to happen. And if it's generally everything's okay, then that's fine. We can go through adjustments and follow up on questions with Joe and Marissa. But if you think there's going to be more input coming, we ought to reserve some review time in 2 weeks or 2 meetings out, something. I think we ought to set some time frame that says that we really need your feedback by the end of February or something like that.
I think that's reasonable.
Well, from my perspective, as I just said, total's high, it is what it is. There's nothing in here I'm opposed to.
I get that. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or your team on the spot. I think to make it clear, now we're trying to enable the FinCom to make sure your advice is heard. There's, we're supporting mailings to the entire town so people know what's going on. Last thing would be horrible if all of a sudden we're munching along thinking everything's fine, and all of a sudden it's March and you weren't happy with what's happening.
Right.
So that's why I think we ought to bake in something that says, no, we're cool with this by the end of
It's on our agenda for
February.
our next meeting, so we will have an opportunity
Okay.
then to go through it there. And if we come up with anything, Marissa's quite often at our meetings. Don't worry, you'll hear about it. There won't be any surprises.
So
So
Scott,
I'm not worried.
On
We
the
have
other
a
side
very
of that-
detailed budget calendar, so I think it's important that we structure it so that
Stick to it.
we get
Absolutely.
the feedback at the time that we need it.
On the other
We got your
side,
calendar.
you've been involved more with the operations. Are there any things that you see that maybe, some of the big items I don't think we're gonna change. We've got projects we have to do. But the day-to-day work, is there anything that should be changing that could adjust this budget?
So the list of items that was up front have been publicly discussed by the select board for
Yeah.
a long time.
Right.
Multiple boards going back, so whether, should we have an HR role?
Right.
And we've been talking
Well,
about that.
we've been back and forth on that a lot, and it's really awkward to have employees who, they kind of, if there's an issue, they only go to, it's a pyramid system, they only go to the town manager. So having an alternate source with HR, we're 70-plus employees in our town, it's something that we've discussed for a long, long, long time. Same with DPW is, we've had multiple studies of our own, of third parties looking at the resources in the DPW department and comparative amounts of money that we spend in our town compared to others and how it's lower. So there's no new news there, I don't think, from a select board standpoint. Those are things that have been years in the coming.
Yeah, I agree.
Sean, Scott, do you guys, if the FinCom after the next meeting wants to have either another joint meeting or an opportunity for Phil to come in and report out, we plan to make that.
I'm in
make
favor
that
of the
available to
public views too, because this is Saturday morning, it's great, and we're on camera probably, and maybe some people are watching it, but I do think that kind of a chance, even if we feel like we're restating a few things, I think it's important that we restate a few things at an upcoming meeting and
Yeah, I
have a
think
joint one.
if you or John come in and give us a little synopsis of the wrap-up from your meeting and
Or even if we maybe maybe this is too big a thing, but maybe we get Dr. Harvey back one more time as
We
a,
have another joint meeting with the schools, too.
Yeah, in February. I
February
don't remember the
5th or
date off the hand. Yeah, it's coming up.
I'm thinking of our budget,
yeah.
Yeah.
the town of Hamilton, and how we project ourselves to our taxpayers who are going to be voting in April on what happens. So I'm kind of a fan of,
I think that's a good idea. If we could get someone from your board to come in and speak to us, and we invite Dr. Harvey as well, when we talk about our budget, and Dr. Harvey can talk about their budget and how it relates and some more kind of fine details.
Right.
I think that'd be good.
Because these are big numbers year over year compared to, like, last year, everyone's gonna forget it was 1% in the town last year.
Yeah.
It's just history. So, I think people are gonna go, whoa, what's going on? Tax rate's up, my bill's up,
Right.
assessed values are up.
Right, and I think
It's
another.
when you look at your bill that you really.
Right, when you look at your, and I think another thing would be that what we've talked about today at the beginning of the meeting, and Scott wasn't here for it, is the breakdown of the tax rate and the specifics that Marissa gave us, I think is
Yeah.
great. And if we can keep
Yep.
saying that
Yep.
out loud to people, I think that's gonna make them understand it even more and get what's going on with the budget.
And the only other question I had was from your FinCom's view of the budget so far is, we're starting to develop the warrant for the town meeting. Are there any other breakdown of the budget or the school budget that we ought to start thinking about for as distinct warrant articles too? Something from your standpoint, like whenever we get together again in 2 weeks or a month or whenever
We
it
had
is,
that
like.
discussion, we had a discussion about that, and we didn't come up with anything concrete, but it was on our, in our radar, we
Yeah,
were discussing.
cool. I'm not saying we gotta
Yeah,
force it, just keep it as a regular
We
thing that we
talked
think about.
Similar to what we did last year with the school budget, separating the capital from the operating with the school budget, just so people get a better idea of the capital
I
stuff
think
that
that
they're
still makes sense,
looking to
actually,
do.
but we don't have their.
But we don't have their
plan.
capital.
Right,
That one I do think still makes sense.
right.
And-
Because I think it's an opportunity
And we need to do that
for,
anyway for us anyway.
For us
Because their
anyway.
capital becomes a debt exclusion, and it should be a separate item.
right, exactly. And I think it helps them also by us separating it. They probably don't like it too much, but it helps them pitch the improvements that they want to do to the town instead of just one blanket thing.
Yeah, and I think we've been pushing for years, is to not have a one-year capital budget, but to have a multi-year
Five-year
capital budget.
forecast, right.
Because if we don't have that, it's hard to look at what's coming. And I think that's they have not been very concrete about that. It's sort of, oh, well, this maybe, and this maybe, and.
Right, and we've seen what little they've done with it, where they're, take one thing and put it here and take this one off and then backfill it with 10 other things. I mean, they did that with the turf last year, right? They had that.
They need to prioritize.
Yeah, it wasn't prioritized and it was, oh, this isn't right.
It was easy to
so
move
we
around, yeah.
Move this and, less of a shuffle, more of a concrete thing would be helpful to everybody involved.
You don't feel like you're touching something solid.
Yes.
I'm afraid I have to leave, so I don't know if we need to adjourn. But I wanted to thank you, Marissa, and Diane, and all of your staff, and Joe that worked on this. This is great.
Yeah.
That's agreed.
This is the
Yeah,
best
very,
one
very
so
good.
far.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's logical. You can follow it. It's a wonderful thing.
I'm glad you like it. It's mine and Marissa's goal to make it even better next year, both in terms of the number, but also in terms of the way it reads. But I'm glad you're satisfied with the presentation of it this year. And like I said, let's get to work and figure out what it's going to be.
Yeah. Anything else from you guys? I know Allison's got to go. I'm looking to wrap it up anyway. I'll accept a motion if somebody wants to make it.
I make a motion that the Board of Selectmen adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
Unanimous?
make a motion that the FinCom adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Thanks,
Both
everybody.
votes were unanimous.
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you,
This is your
Thanks,
second,
Marcy.
is this your second year doing the budget?